I wiped the sweat from my forehead, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The air in my cramped, old room was thick and humid. I had just finished another grueling workout, pushing my body to its absolute limit, but nothing felt different. Still no change. I muttered, frustration gnawing at my gut. I closed my eyes and focused. In the darkness of my mind, a semi-transparent interface flickered into view. Name, Su Chao. Origin, merging. Awakening progress, 99%. You've got to be kidding me. I cursed under my breath. I was a junior at the Shanghai City Institute of Technology. Back in high school, I couldn't apply for the martial arts track because my awakening had failed. I was forced into liberal arts instead. For an entire semester now, that progress bar had been stuck at 99%. It was a secret I kept from everyone. The panel appeared 3 years ago, during the winter break of my senior year. My parents and I were traveling with a merchant caravan to a neighboring base city for my sister Su Yufei's wedding. On the way back, a psionic tide erupted. It was chaos. Crazed monsters swarmed the caravan. Our guards fought desperately to break through, but the casualties were horrific. My father, Su Jianya, was a rank 3 martial artist. To save my mother and me, he pushed his body past its breaking point, taking a blow that nearly killed him. We only survived because a top-tier powerhouse happened to be passing by. In that moment of life and death, I actually awakened. It was an SS-grade talent, Infinite Devour. I was ecstatic, feeling the raw power surging through me. But then, something happened. A mysterious fragment, hidden within the psionic tide, struck me in the head. I blacked out instantly. When I woke up a week later, my world shattered. The SS-grade talent was gone. In its place was this strange status panel, showing my progress at a measly 1%. Worse yet, my genetic lock, the gate that opens when you awaken, had slammed shut. I had become an unawakened person once again. Since then, things had gone from bad to worse. My father's medical bills drained every cent we had. We sold the house just to keep him alive, but we couldn't afford the long-term treatment. We moved here, to District 25, a slum on the edge of Shanghai Bay City where the rent was cheap and life was hard. 5 days ago, my mother, Wang Lihua, called me at school. Dad was in critical condition. I rushed home, and though the doctors saved him, he insisted on leaving the hospital the moment he woke up. He didn't want to waste any more money. I checked the time. It was 10 p.m. I reached for the door handle to go wash up, but I stopped when I heard hushed, heated voices coming from the living room. The walls in this place were paper thin. Lihua, let me go. My father's voice was a strained whisper. I can't keep dragging you two down. What are you saying, Jianya? My mother hissed back. I could hear her sobbing. We've fought for years. You saved our lives back then. I'm not giving up on you now. I don't want to leave you, Dad rasped. But look at us. Where did the money for this last hospital stay come from? Did you go to Jean the Pockmark? We have nothing left. My old brothers in the hunting squad have helped all they can, but they risk their lives for every penny. And Yufei? She and her husband barely make enough to get by, yet they keep sending us money. My body is a bottomless pit. If I don't stop this, I'll destroy this family. He paused, his voice trembling. Those loan sharks are vultures, Lihua. If you get involved with them, it's over. Let me go? Let Xiao Chao finish university. We don't even have his tuition for next semester yet. Just give us all some peace. I stood frozen behind the door. I couldn't see him, but I knew my father, a man of iron, was crying. No, I won't. Mom's voice was a low roar, desperate to keep me from hearing. Don't give up. I heard from the hunting squad. There's something called a willow heart in the Hunters Association. It can heal you. I'll find a way to get it. A willow heart. Dad laughed weakly. That costs at least 50 million credits. Where would we ever get that kind of money? There will be a way. There has to be. Mom whispered. I pulled my hand back from the door and sat on my bed, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't let them see me like this. I have to awaken, I whispered, my knuckles turning white as I clenched my fists. I have to become a martial artist. It's the only way to save him. I stayed in the dark, staring at the ceiling. It had been 50 years since the Great Nirvana era began. Outside the base cities, monsters ruled the wilderness. Even inside the walls, we weren't always safe. In this world, strength was everything. Most kids who failed to awaken at graduation were stuck working dead-end jobs. But because I had briefly awakened once, my body had been tempered by psionic energy. My physical stats were actually at the level of a pre-martial artist. It was the only reason I had a part-time job as a sparring partner at a local dojo. It paid for my living expenses and took some weight off my mother's shoulders. Tomorrow was Sunday. I had a session at the dojo, and then I needed to head back to school to ask for more time off. I eventually drifted into a restless sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I immediately started my training routine again. Usually, it's impossible for a regular person to awaken after high school. But I wasn't a regular person. I had the panel, and I wasn't giving up until that 99% hit 100. I knew I was going to awaken. I had to. That belief was the only thing that kept me training every single day. After washing up, I sat down for breakfast with my parents. It was a quiet meal, but I stayed with them for a while, just soaking in the normalcy before I grabbed my bag to head out. The sky over Shanghai Bay City was a heavy, bruised gray. It looked like rain. I stepped out of our crumbling apartment complex and stared up at the clouds. Shanghai was massive, one of the 8 great base cities of Huaxia, divided into 31 districts with over 50 million people. The first 5 districts were the core, places where the rich lived in luxury. But the world had changed since the Great Nirvana era 50 years ago. The global population had plummeted to less than 2 billion, and all of Huaxia held fewer than 400 million people. My family lived in District 25, the suburbs. My school and the dojo where I worked were in District 20. It was a 2-hour commute every single day. I started navigating the narrow, familiar alleys. The rain began to fall, soaking my shoes and the hems of my pants. Thunder rumbled overhead like a warning. I gripped my umbrella tighter and picked up the pace. To save time, I always took the shortcuts through the deserted back streets. I was about to turn into a particularly narrow alley when I heard it. A strange, mechanical clicking sound. My heart skipped a beat. Then, the smell hit me, the metallic tang of blood. The rain was washing it away, but my senses as a pre-martial artist were sharp enough to catch it. I froze. Should I go back? My gut told me something was wrong, but turning back meant a massive detour. I hesitated for a second, then reached into my bag and pulled out a dagger. It was a gift from my father for my 18th birthday. Feeling the weight of the steel in my hand gave me a surge of confidence. I crept forward, my boots splashing softly in the puddles. The alley looked empty, but the clicking sound was coming from behind a pile of trash near a drainage grate. The manhole cover had been tossed aside. My pulse hammered in my ears. I moved closer, inch by inch, until I rounded the trash heap. My skin crawled. Cold sweat broke out instantly. It was a monster. It was over 2 meters long with coarse, grayish-black fur that shimmered with an eerie light. It had 2 glowing crimson eyes that snapped up to meet mine. It bared its razor-sharp fangs, a low growl vibrating in its chest. There was a horrific wound on its underbelly, and its left back leg was twisted at an impossible angle. It was a rat-type monster, and it was badly hurt. I froze for a split second. Then, I dropped my umbrella and bolted. Crap. Why is there a monster here? I cursed internally, my legs pumping. But after a few yards, I realized something was off. It wasn't chasing me. Usually, a monster would tear after a human the moment they made eye contact. I stopped and looked back. The clicking sound continued from behind the trash. I forced myself to think. It must have been wounded by someone and escaped into the sewers, only coming out now because it was hungry. If it wasn't chasing me, it meant it was dying. A wild thought flashed through my mind. My heart started thumping against my ribs. Monster corpses were worth a fortune. Even a basic rank 1 monster could pay for my entire next semester's tuition. I was a pre-martial artist, and my dagger was made of rank 1 alloy. It was sharp enough to kill. Risk it for the reward, I whispered. I dropped my bag in a corner and pried a fist-sized stone out of a crumbling wall. I crept back toward the trash pile. When I was close enough, I lunged out and hurled the stone at the monster's head, immediately spinning around to run. The stone shattered against its skull with a loud crack. The monster roared, its fangs bared in a terrifying snarl, but it didn't move. The effort seemed to tear open its belly wound, and fresh blood poured onto the pavement. It was trying to intimidate me because it couldn't give chase. It was my chance. I grabbed a heavy bag of trash and threw it right at its face. As the monster swiped at the bag, its vision obscured by flying debris, I lunged. I drove my dagger deep into its neck and ripped it sideways. Hot blood sprayed across my face. The creature shrieked and slammed its body into me. It felt like being hit by a car. I flew 10 feet back and hit the ground hard, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Everything hurt, but I didn't stop. I scrambled up and dove back in, stabbing at its neck again and again. We struggled in the mud and rain. At one point, its claws raked across my right arm, leaving burning red gashes, but I didn't let go. Finally, the monster slumped to the ground, twitching feebly. I stabbed it a few more times just to be sure, then collapsed next to the carcass, gasping for air. Suddenly, my whole body shuddered. I felt a surge of strange, cold energy rushing into me from the air around us. It felt like my cells were being rebuilt, a sensation so blissful I almost lost consciousness. It lasted for several long seconds. I looked at the panel in my mind. It had changed. My hands shook. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. I had finally done it. I had awakened. I was a rank 1 martial artist. My life would never be the same again. I was a rank 1 martial artist now. My strength had surged, but I knew this was only the beginning. In this world, martial artists were ranked from 1 to 9, and rumor had it there were levels even beyond that. These powerhouses were the only reason humanity hadn't been wiped out yet. I stood there in the rain, my mind racing through the history I'd learned. It all started on September 18, 2031. The spirit tide swept the globe, triggering a forced evolution for every living thing. Animals changed faster and grew stronger, forming beast nests that leveled entire cities. Modern weapons eventually became useless against the strongest of them, especially when the massive sea monsters joined the invasion. Humanity had to retreat, abandoning most of the world to huddle in massive base cities protected by elite warriors. Even now, 50 years later, only 8 super base cities remained in Huaxia. I took a deep breath and looked back at my mental panel. Something was different. I remembered that I was supposed to have an SS rank ability called Endless Devour, but the panel now listed rank 1 Shadow Shield. I had a theory. That mysterious fragment I found must have fused with my original ability to create this interface. As for the Shadow Shield, I looked down at the dead rat monster. I'd read online that rare monsters like the Shadow Rat possessed a talent called Shadow Shield. My heart skipped a beat. Did my panel just steal the monster's ability? If I could gain the powers of every beast I killed, I would become a god. I needed to find another mutated beast soon to test this. Then I noticed the little plus sign next to my constitution stat. I focused my mind on it. Instantly, a warm current flowed through my veins. I felt my muscles tighten and my bones grow denser. I checked the panel again. Name, Su Chao, level, rank 1 martial artist, ability, rank 1 shadow shield, constitution, 12, plus, spirit, 11, origin points, 35. It cost 10 origin points to raise my constitution by 1. I tried to click the plus sign next to spirit, but nothing happened. I guess my points were too low for that one. I decided to save the remaining 35 points for later. I squeezed my fists, feeling the explosive power in my grip. If I fought that shadow rat again, I wouldn't struggle. In fact, considering how hard it was to kill even while it was half dead, that thing was likely a rank 2 monster. I shuddered at the risk I'd taken, but a grin spread across my face. High risk, high reward. I tested the shadow shield ability. My movement speed instantly jumped by 50%. It was incredible. I made a silent vow right then. No one could ever know about this panel. It was my greatest secret. I wiped the rain from my face. I couldn't stay here. The fight had been loud, and someone might come investigating. I found a large, sturdy sack in the trash pile and stuffed the rat's carcass inside. I cleaned up the blood as best I could, slid the manhole cover back into place, and grabbed my gear. I swapped my shredded shirt for a spare from my bag. My wounds had already scabbed over thanks to my new physical stats. I vanished into the rain just in time. 2 streets away, 2 men in their 30s were stalking through the shadows. They carried weapons and a compass-like tracking device. One of them, a man with a jagged scar across his face, spat on the ground in frustration. Damn it, That beast is too fast, Scarface growled. We've been hunting it for 2 hours. This sewer system is a maze. The man with the compass glared at him. Stop complaining. It's your fault for letting it slip past you into the drains. That was a rank 2 shadow rat. It's worth a fortune. How was I supposed to know it would burn its life force for a shadow shield burst? Scarface countered. Keep looking. It's badly wounded. It can't have gone far, even with this rain washing out the scent. I didn't know how close I'd come to a confrontation. Carrying a 200-pound sack was easy now that I was a martial artist. After 30 minutes of walking, I arrived at a massive 5-story building in District 25. The sign above the door read, the Hunters Association. This was a massive organization founded by the top families in Huaxia. They had branches in every city. It was the perfect place for people like me to sell monster materials, buy weapons, or find a place to rest. I walked inside, ready to collect my first real payday. I'd heard that high-level members of the Hunters Association could access special services, but I wasn't there for that. I stepped into the lobby and stopped. The place was massive. It was divided into several zones, lounges, trading hubs, and equipment stalls. It wasn't very crowded today, so I walked straight to a counter in the trading area. A woman in her mid-20s looked up at me with a professional smile. Sir, how can I help you today? I set a heavy bag on the counter. On my way here, I'd spent a few credits to replace that shredded, bloody sack with a proper gym bag. I didn't want to look like a total amateur. Tell me how much this is worth, I said. She opened the bag, and her eyes widened slightly. She spent a few minutes inspecting the carcass inside. Sir, this is a rank 2 shadow rat. The materials are in excellent condition. We can offer you 180,000 credits. Does that work for you? Works for me, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I'd done my homework. A rank 1 monster usually fetched under 100,000. Rank 2s topped out at 200,000, and rank 3s could go for 500,000. This rat wasn't the most valuable of its rank, so getting 180,000 was likely a bonus because it was an awakened variant. The transaction was fast. A few taps on her screen, and my phone buzzed. I looked at my balance, 180,552 credits. I stared at the screen, momentarily stunned. My mother worked as an elementary school teacher and made barely 5,000 a month. I had just made 3 years of her salary in a single morning. I decided to browse the equipment section to see what I could buy, but my excitement died quickly. Everything was insanely expensive. A decent grade, 1 alloy weapon cost hundreds of thousands. There were cheaper F-grade weapons, but they weren't much better than my current dagger. The grading system was strict. F, E, D, C, B, A, S, and so on. The higher the grade, the sharper and more durable the blade. Then I checked the martial arts techniques. My heart sank. A basic technique cost 700,000. Intermediate ones were out of the question. After weighing my options, I settled on a movement technique called Shadow Sting. It cost me 150,000 credits. It was a lot, but it paired perfectly with my shadow shield. The clerk warned me that the technique was for my use only. If I tried to resell it or teach it to someone else, the consequences would be lethal. I left the building with only 30,000 credits left in my pocket. It was nearly 11 a.m. Right next door was the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. Every newly awakened person was required to register there. I walked in, filled out the paperwork, and walked out with a breathing cultivation method. It was a free, basic version, but it was a start. Better versions required contribution points, which I didn't have yet. I had to catch a bus. My job as a combat partner at the martial arts gym started at 3 p.m. Even though I was an awakened martial artist now and didn't need the job, the gym had kept me fed for years. I owed it to them to quit in person, but first, I had to make a call. I dialed the number, and my mother, Wang Lihua, picked up instantly. Xiao Xiao, what's wrong? Did you leave something at home? Her voice was full of worry. My eyes stung. Mom, I said, my voice firm. I've awakened. Tell Dad to hang on. Our lives are about to change. I'm going to find a way to cure him. I heard the sound of a phone hitting the floor on the other end. Then, her voice came back, trembling with joy. Xiao Xiao, is it really true? By 2:30 p.m., I arrived at the Limitless Martial Arts Gym. In this era, everyone wanted to be a warrior. The street was lined with gyms, and this one was packed with high school students hoping to awaken before their college entrance exams. Most of them were just chasing a dream that would never happen. I'd heard about gene serums that could force an awakening, but they were incredibly expensive and the results were never as good as a natural awakening. I found the manager, Wang Ming, and handed him 2 cartons of high-end cigarettes I'd bought for 800 credits. "Brother Wang," I said, "I'm here to tell you I can't be a combat partner anymore. This is a small thanks for looking out for me when things were tough." Wang Ming looked confused. He tried to push the cigarettes back. "What are you doing? Did you hit the lottery? I know your family's situation. Don't waste your money." "I've awakened, Brother Wang," I said seriously. "I can take care of my family now." He froze. "You're kidding me, right?" It was rare for someone to awaken this late, but once he realized I was serious, he clapped me on the shoulder. "What's the plan then?" "I'm going to focus on training. I might head out to the wilderness soon." "The wilderness is dangerous," he warned. "Be careful." I stayed for one last session. Being a combat partner for students was easy now that I had the strength of a true martial artist. Wang Ming even used my story to motivate the kids, telling them how I persisted until I finally awakened. They looked at me like I was a legend, their eyes burning with renewed hope. Once I finished, I headed back to Shanghai Polytechnic University. I didn't go to my dorm. I just grabbed a quick bite at the cafeteria, my mind already on the training ahead. I retreated to a quiet corner and pulled out the manual I'd spent 150,000 credits on, the basic martial art, Shadow Piercer. I had a theory I needed to test. I flipped through the pages, reading every word carefully until I reached the end. Then, I focused on the interface in my mind. The panel flickered to life. My name, Su Chao, was followed by my rank, Tier 1 Martial Artist. My talent was Shadow Melt. My stats showed Constitution at 12 and Spirit at 11, with 35 origin points remaining. At the bottom, a new entry appeared, Basic Martial Art, Shadow Piercer, not learned. I was right. I could use the panel to level up my techniques too. Without hesitation, I commanded the system to upgrade. 10 origin points vanished instantly. Shadow Piercer shifted from not learned to entry level. I tried to push it further, but the option was grayed out. I probably didn't have enough points. I decided to dump my remaining points into my physical body. The panel updated again. My Constitution rose to 14, while my Spirit stayed at 11. I had 5 origin points left. Looking at that low number, I felt a familiar pressure. This panel was a bottomless pit. I needed to find a way to hunt more monsters, and fast. I wanted to see what entry-level Shadow Piercer actually felt like. Shanghai Polytechnic was a massive campus. Even though it focused on liberal arts, it still had a dedicated, multi-story combat training hall. In this era, martial power was everything. The hall was brightly lit when I walked in. The first floor was packed with students sweating over various training machines. I ignored them and headed straight for the second floor. They had private rooms there for strength and speed testing. I found an empty strength testing room and stepped inside. I loosened up my shoulders and took a deep breath. I threw a heavy punch straight at the target. The machine let out a dull thud. The digital display numbers blurred as they climbed, finally settling at 1,480 kilograms. I couldn't help but grin. A typical Tier 1 martial artist usually has a raw physical output between 1,000 and 2,000 kilograms. Tier 2 starts at 2,000. For a fresh Tier 1, I was already sitting in a very comfortable spot. Before my awakening, my limit was only 980 kilograms. Looking at my stats, I realized that every point in Constitution was worth exactly 100 kilograms of raw force. Next, I tested the Shadow Piercer technique. As soon as I activated the knowledge I'd bought with my points, a flood of memories rushed into my brain. It felt like I'd been practicing this move for years. It was fluid, natural, and instinctive. After a few strikes, the machine confirmed it. The technique added about 10% to my total attack power. For most people, reaching entry level in a martial art takes months of grueling practice. Reaching the minor mastery stage takes years. Great mastery requires both time and immense talent. As for perfection, I'd barely even heard of anyone reaching that level. I moved to the speed testing room next. My base speed clocked in at 32 meters per second. The average range for my tier was 25 to 40, so I was doing well. If I activated my Shadow Meld talent, my speed would jump by 50%, putting me on par with a Tier 2 martial artist. I finally had a clear picture of where I stood. I was strong for my rank, but I had one major weakness. I was broke. I had no gear. My short-term goal was set. Kill monsters, get origin points, and make enough money to buy decent equipment. Exhaustion finally started to settle in. Between the training and the fight with the monsters earlier, I was spent. I headed for the exit, but as I stepped out, I nearly collided with someone. The guy looked at me and let out a mocking laugh. Well, look who it is. Our almost martial artist, Suchao. You've been hiding from me for days, but I guess my luck finally turned. I frowned. It was Zhou Peng, a student from my year. We had history. Back in freshman year, my roommate Hanyu got hammered at a night market and accidentally threw up on Zhou Peng's shoes. We apologized and offered to pay for the cleaning, but Zhou Peng started swinging. Since I was a top-tier student back then, I ended up beating him and his 4 friends senseless. He'd hated me ever since. Zhou Peng had been waiting for revenge. He'd recently awakened an F-rank talent, making him a genuine Tier 1 martial artist. He thought he finally had the upper hand. Zhou Peng, this is a training hall, I said, trying to push past him. Don't start something. I didn't have time for this cockroach. But as I walked by, he lunged at me, his hand clawing for my shoulder. I sensed it coming and stepped aside effortlessly. He froze, clearly surprised I'd dodged him. His face darkened. Are we really doing this? I asked, my voice cold. Fine. Let's settle it. There are cameras out here. Let's go inside. I walked back into the speed testing room. It was large enough for a real fight. Zhou Peng hesitated for a second, wondering why I was acting so bold, but his ego won out. He followed me in, and I shut the door behind him. I wanted this. I was a new Tier 1, and I needed to see how I measured up against another martial artist. Zhou Peng was the perfect test subject. Your move, I said. He didn't waste words. He charged, throwing a punch that whistled through the air. I met him head-on. Our fists collided with a heavy thud. Zhou Peng stumbled back 2 steps, his face twisting in pain. I didn't budge. I barely felt it. His punch felt like it was around 1,100 kilograms, weaker than mine. He stared at me, eyes wide with shock. When did you awaken? If even a guy like you can do it, why wouldn't I? I sneered. Stop acting tough, he barked. He realized he couldn't win with raw strength, so he got serious. His hands blurred, and small, glowing arc-shaped blades of energy shot toward me at high speed. He followed right behind them, waiting for his opening. I watched the energy blades arc toward me, glowing with a dangerous light. I felt a sharp prickle of danger. I couldn't take these head-on. I activated my shadow meld, my body blurring as I stepped into the darkness to dodge. A loud crack echoed through the room. The blade slammed into the wall behind me, leaving shallow gouges in the surface. Within seconds, the metal began to ripple and smooth out, returning to its original state. Memory metal. This room was built to take a beating. My pulse quickened. If I hadn't moved, those blades would have cut me deep. Zhou Peng's F-rank talent, Energy Blade, wasn't a joke. It reminded me never to underestimate anyone, regardless of their rank. But I was done playing games. I had seen enough of his strength. I lunged forward, using my shadow meld to close the distance instantly. A series of muffled thuds and sharp cries followed. 10 minutes later, I stood over him. Zhou Peng lay on the floor, his face a mess of bruises and swelling. He stared up at me with a look of pure resentment. If you awakened, why did you keep hiding it from me? He wheezed. I looked down at him, my expression cold. Shut up and listen. My business is none of yours. Are we done here? He struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. Fine. I give up. He wasn't stupid. He knew if he said no, another beating was coming. I didn't care if he was sincere. As long as I kept getting stronger, he'd never be a threat again. I left the training hall feeling lighter and headed back to the dorm. When I pushed the door open, my 3 roommates were there. Tanjun was at his computer, screaming insults at his teammates in a game. Yu Zhongqi was buried in a book, occasionally glaring at Tanjun for being too loud. Then there was Hanyu, lying on his bed scrolling through his phone. Hanyu looked up and grinned. Chow, you're back? Training again? I nodded. Yeah, for a bit. You're too driven, man, Hanyu sighed. It's just bad luck you didn't awaken like Zhou Peng. That grandson got so lucky. Now he's going around telling everyone he's going to deal with you. You should be careful. I'm not afraid of him, I said. Hanyu shook his head. Just stay away from him. He's in the martial arts class now. The school treats those guys like royalty. If you get into a fight, the principal will take his side. I know, I replied calmly. Maybe I'll join the martial arts class too. Hanyu rolled his eyes. They all knew how hard I worked, and they respected the effort, but none of them actually believed I'd awaken this late. Usually, if it hasn't happened by now, it never will. But I had a plan. Joining the martial arts class meant better resources, professional teachers, and actual sparring partners. I was tired of figuring things out on my own. I washed up and hit the sack, exhausted from the day's events. The next morning, I did my usual hour of exercise before heading to the cafeteria with Hanyu. The campus was busy. It was June 29th, and final exams were only 2 weeks away. Everyone was rushing to class, hoping to catch whatever hints the professors dropped about the tests. We were standing in the breakfast line when the atmosphere suddenly shifted. Four students walked in, wearing matching black skin-tight training suits. The girl leading them was tall with an incredible figure, though her face was plain. As they walked, the crowd of students parted like a wave. It's the martial arts class, someone whispered. That's Muzian. She's a Tier 3 martial artist with a B-rank talent. She's top 5 in the whole school. The guy behind her is Jiang Hao. He's Tier 2 peak. He's been chasing her for years. The group walked straight to the front of our line. They didn't say a word, they just stepped in. The students at the front didn't complain. They actually moved back to make room. Must be nice, Hanyu muttered, pushed back along with me. No lines, no mandatory boring classes. If I were in the martial arts class, my dad would finally stop breathing down my neck. I watched them take their food. The special treatment was glaringly obvious. It only made me more certain. After breakfast, I told Hanyu I had errands at the administration building and split off. Inside one of the offices, a few teachers were chatting. Old Jiang, one teacher said, I remember you had a student who reached quasi-martial artist level in his freshman year. Has he awakened yet? Su Chao, right? My class teacher, Jiang, sighed. That kid, it's a shame. He's still training every day, but nothing. Just then, I knocked on the door. Come in, Mr. Jiang called out. I stepped inside, looked him in the eye, and spoke clearly. Teacher, I've awakened. I walked into the office and greeted the group of teachers politely. Hello, teachers, I said, keeping my voice steady. My class teacher, Mr. Jiang, looked up and smiled when he saw me. Oh, Su Chao? What brings you here? Mr. Jiang, I have something to discuss with you, I said. Do you have a moment? Of course, he replied. What's on your mind? I glanced at the other teachers in the room and hesitated for a second. Then, I braced myself. Mr. Jiang, I want to transfer to the martial arts class. The room went quiet. Mr. Jiang stared at me, stunned. He sighed, his expression turning sympathetic. Su Chao, I know you've reached the quasi-martial artist level, but you still don't meet the requirements for the martial arts class. The principal won't make an exception. I really can't help you with this. I realized he had misunderstood. Mr. Jiang, it's my fault for not being clear. I corrected him quickly. I've awakened. According to school rules, I'm eligible to transfer now. What? Mr. Jiang's eyes widened. You awakened? Su Chao, this isn't something to joke about. The school has to run official tests. I really did, I insisted. I wouldn't joke about something like this. It happened a few days ago while I was at home. I could see the doubt in his eyes, and I couldn't blame him. Usually, the older you get, the harder it is to awaken. Most students in the martial arts class awaken during their freshman year. After a long moment, the reality finally sank in. The other teachers in the room looked just as shocked. Su Chao, one of them asked, what kind of talent did you awaken? What rank is it? Tier 1, I replied simply. Tier 1? That's still very good. Mr. Jiang beamed. He knew how hard I had worked over the years, and he seemed genuinely happy for me. He didn't waste any time. He stood up to take me to the principal's office to handle the transfer immediately. I was already behind the others in the martial arts class by a couple of years. There was no time to lose. As we walked out, I heard another teacher, Mr. Huang, sighing behind us. Must be nice. Now both your classes have awakened students. Mine still has 0. We reached the principal's office and found him in. His name was Huagang. He looked to be in his late 30s and dressed like a refined scholar, but rumors said he was an incredibly powerful martial artist who had been transferred here from the prestigious 1st District. Principal Hua asked me a few questions about my talent, its rank, and how the awakening happened. I gave him a mix of truth and half-lies to keep my secrets safe. After the interrogation, he made a phone call. A few minutes later, the door opened. "Principal, you called for me?" I blinked. A woman walked in, and she was impossible to ignore. She looked about 30, with a tall, lithe figure accentuated by her tight-fitting martial arts suit. She was beautiful, but her eyes were cold, giving her a sharp, intimidating aura. Principal Hua seemed to have a bit of a headache just looking at her. "Teacher Chu, you're here. This is Su Chao. He just awakened and is transferring to your class. Please take him to complete the paperwork." The woman, Teacher Chu, turned her gaze toward me. Her expression was flat. "What year are you? What rank is your talent?" "I'm a junior, Teacher Chu," I said, feeling a strange pressure just being near her. It was even more intense than the pressure from the principal. I awakened a Tier 1 talent. "A junior?" she muttered, though I heard her clearly. "Just like Zhou Peng. Awakening this late, you might not even hit Tier 2 by graduation." She didn't wait for a response. "Follow me." She turned and walked out without even saying goodbye to the principal. Principal Hua just gave a bitter smile and shook his head, clearly used to her attitude. I quickly bowed to him and Mr. Jiang before rushing to catch up. An hour later, I was officially a student of the Shanghai Polytechnic martial arts class. I learned that my new homeroom teacher's name was Chu Xian. She was definitely powerful. During the walk, she explained the perks. The treatment was worlds apart from the regular classes. Martial arts students didn't pay tuition. I was even given a 50,000 yuan bonus just for joining as a newly awakened student. However, there was a catch. We were tested every semester. If our progress was too slow, our resources would be cut. On the plus side, we had our own dormitory building where everyone got their own private room. Finally, we arrived at a separate building used exclusively by the 50 or so martial arts students. Inside, a combat class was in progress. The room was loud, filled with the sounds of students cheering around a sparring ring. A middle-aged man in his 40s, Mr. Chun, was lecturing. When Teacher Chu walked in, the room went silent. She clapped her hands. "Everyone, listen up. We have a new student. This is Su Chao. He just awakened and will be joining us starting today. I expect you all to help him out. Welcome him." There was some scattered, unenthusiastic applause. I scanned the crowd. I saw Zhou Peng standing there, his face a mask of indifference. I also saw Mu Zian, the girl from the cafeteria. "Su Chao, come meet Mr. Chun," Teacher Chu said. "He handles practical combat." "Hello, Mr. Chun." "Chun." "Hello, seniors," I said, bowing slightly. In this class, strength was everything. Since I was the newcomer, I played it humble. "Please look after me." Teacher Chu left shortly after, leaving me with Mr. Chun. "Su Chao, since you just awakened, just watch for today," he told me. "Observe their techniques, listen to my critiques, and try to wrap your head around it." "Understood, Mr. Chun," I said. I spent the rest of the morning watching the sparring matches intently. Mr. Chen's pointers were sharp and insightful. Even though I wasn't fighting, I felt like I was learning a lot just by observing. As the class neared its end, I expected him to dismiss us. Instead, Mr. Chen looked at me and gestured toward the ring. "Su Chao, you've been watching for an hour. You must have some thoughts of your own. How about it? Want to give it a try?" I didn't hesitate. "I'd like to try, Mr. Chen." I had no intention of staying low-key. If I wanted the school to give me more resources, I had to show them I was worth the investment. "Good," Mr. Chen praised, nodding. "A martial artist needs a bold heart. Zhang Dali, come out and spar with Su Chao." A slightly chubby guy stepped out of the crowd and stood opposite me. He gave me a friendly smile. "Don't worry, Junior Su. I'll go easy on you." He beckoned me forward with his hand. "Come on, kid. You take the first move. If you don't attack now, you won't get another chance," Zhang Dali joked. I cupped my fists in a respectful salute. "Please, senior, guide me." The moment the words left my lips, I lunged. I didn't hold back. I poured my full strength into the charge. Zhang Dali didn't try to dodge. He raised a palm to block, clearly wanting to test my raw power. A dull thud echoed through the hall. Zhang Dali stumbled back a full step. I only swayed slightly. Wait, what? Someone whispered from the sidelines. Jiang Dali lost in a contest of strength. Isn't he a fresh awakener? How is he this strong? He must have a physical enhancement talent. He definitely used his ability just now. The crowd erupted in hushed chatter. Jiang Dali's face turned a deep shade of red. He had been too careless. His expression shifted from playful to serious as he squared his shoulders. Junior Su, I'm going all out now, he warned. Watch yourself. He let out a low shout. A faint yellow glow shimmered across his skin, coating him like a suit of invisible armor. Dali is getting serious, a student noted. That's his Earth-grade talent, mountain armor. It boosts his defense and strength simultaneously. Su Chao won't be able to break through that. I watched the golden light settle on him. I wanted to see if I could crack his defense without relying on my shadow abilities or martial techniques. I threw a heavy punch. It landed squarely on his chest, but it felt like hitting a solid brick wall. The recoil sent me skidding back several feet. Haha, Su Chao, if you don't use your talent, this fight is over, Jiang Dali roared. He charged at me, his heavy footsteps thumping against the floor like a drum. I couldn't afford to be cocky. Taking a direct hit from him now would definitely break some ribs. I activated Shadow Meld, my body blurring as I flicked to the side with unnatural speed. He's so fast, someone gasped. That's not the speed of a beginner. He must be a speed type. Then where did that strength come from earlier? This guy is weird. I ignored the commentary. I wanted to end this quickly and show my full potential. As I dodged his next swing, I channeled my energy. I executed the Shadow Piercer technique, my fingers stiffening into a blade-like point. Combined with the burst of speed from my talent, I lunged at his right shoulder before he could react. The strike landed, but I didn't break through. A sharp, stinging pain shot through my fingers. His defense was even tougher than I thought. I didn't panic. I used my superior agility to dance around him. Jiang Dali was strong, but he was too slow to touch me. I stayed on the offensive, striking the exact same spot on his right shoulder over and over again. 10 strikes. 12. 15. Suddenly, a muffled crack sounded, followed by a sharp cry of pain. Jiang Dali scrambled backward, clutching his right arm. His face was pale. No way. He actually broke through the mountain armor. The room went silent with shock. Mr. Chen stepped forward, his eyes fixed on me with intense focus. Su Chao, have you already learned a martial technique? Yes, I replied, catching my breath. A basic one. And you've already reached the entry level of mastery? I just reached it, yes. Mr. Chen leaned in. How long did it take you to learn it? About a week, I said. Mr. Chen's eyes practically caught fire. The students around us looked like they had seen a ghost. Some of them had been practicing for months and still hadn't mastered their first technique. I could see the realization hitting them. The talent gap between us was a canyon. Mr. Chun turned to the class, using me as a lesson. You see this? The path of a martial artist is about constant progress. If you seniors don't work harder, the newcomers will leave you in the dust. And remember, never underestimate an opponent. Some people love to play the pig to eat the tiger. In this world, only the cautious survive. He dismissed the class, and the students began to filter out, whispering about me as they went. You're something else, kid, a voice boomed. I turned to see Jiang Dali. He grinned and slapped me on the shoulder, seemingly holding no grudge. You've been hiding this, haven't you? You probably awakened a long time ago and just wanted to surprise everyone today. I just looked at him, speechless. His imagination was doing all the heavy lifting for me. Don't get too cocky, though, he added. Beating me is no big deal. I'm middle of the pack here. As we walked, Jiang Dali filled me in on the class hierarchy. There were 49 of us. About a dozen were Tier 1, while the majority were Tier 2. The real heavy hitters, the Tier 3 seniors, weren't even here today. They were out in the wilderness, hunting monsters for real. He explained that the martial arts class was flexible. We got one free basic martial technique manual and classes on monster biology, learning their weaknesses and which parts were worth the most money. If the teachers approved, we could even apply for field missions. After grabbing lunch at the cafeteria, where I enjoyed the perk of cutting the line as a martial arts student, I parted ways with Jiang Dali. I headed back toward my dorm, my mind racing with plans. There were only 2 weeks left before the semester break. I planned to spend the first week absorbing everything the school could teach me. Once I was in the martial arts track, my old academic classes became optional. I could focus entirely on getting stronger. I found a quiet corner near the dorms and pulled out my phone. I called my parents and told them I had officially made it into the martial arts class. I transferred 10,000 yuan to them immediately. They tried to refuse, telling me to keep it for my training, but I insisted. I'll be making a lot more soon, I promised them. Everything is going to change for us. Hanging up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was finally able to help them, but I needed more. To get real money and more origin points, I had to go to the wilderness. I had about 20,000 yuan left, plus the 50,000 the school promised would arrive in a few days. It sounded like a lot, but gear and medicine were expensive. I was still broke in the eyes of a real martial artist. I walked into my dorm room and saw my roommates hanging out. I cleared my throat, leaning against the doorframe. "Brothers, I have an announcement," I said, a small smirk on my face. "I've awakened." They all looked up at me, paused for a second, and then simultaneously rolled their eyes. "Chow," Hanyu sighed. "You haven't even hit the bed yet. Save the daydreaming for when you're actually asleep. Are you seriously talking nonsense right now?" Yu Zhongqi asked, squinting at me. "Did Zhou Peng finally break your brain? You've been under a lot of stress lately, man." I sighed and shook my head. "That's enough, you three. This morning, Teacher Jiang took me to see Principal Hua. I've already transferred into the martial arts class. I even took Teacher Chen's combat session today. Why don't you guys believe me?" I spoke with such a straight face that they finally froze. They exchanged looks, wondering if I was actually telling the truth. Hanyu swallowed hard, his eyes searching mine. "Chow, you're not just messing with us to kill time, right?" "I'm not that bored," I said, rolling my eyes. That was the clincher. Hanyu moved faster than I'd ever seen him, kicking a chair toward me. "Brother Chow? Sit. Tell us everything." Tan Junjian cursed under his breath, annoyed that Hanyu beat him to the punch. "You suck up," he muttered, but his hands were already busy. He grabbed my water bottle and filled it to the brim. "You must be thirsty, Brother Chow. Have some water." Yu Zhongqi didn't want to be left out. He grabbed a textbook and started fanning me vigorously. "It's hot outside, isn't it? Let me cool you down, big brother." I couldn't help but laugh at their antics. All right, stop acting like idiots. Sit down. I have something serious to tell you." They sat like obedient schoolboys. I told them that the martial arts class had its own dormitory building. I was moving out that afternoon. We had lived together for 3 years, and even though I was moving, we were still brothers. I told them they could come over and hang out whenever they wanted. We spent the entire afternoon talking. None of us slept. When it was finally time for the afternoon classes, the conversation ended, but the mood was heavy. My roommates knew things were different now. Next year, they would be out in the world, hunting for jobs and struggling to support their families. They would become the beasts of burden of society. But me? My life was going to be an adventure. There's an old saying about male friendship. You're afraid your brother will suffer, but you're even more afraid he'll show up in a Ferrari. Over the next few days, I settled into my new room and attended every martial arts lecture with total focus. I learned a lot. I even tried to learn a basic technique called windbreaker slash. Since I was out of origin points, I tried to figure it out on my own. It didn't go well. My natural talent was average at best. I also practiced my breathing techniques every day, but my strength only increased by a few kilograms. It was too slow. I felt a desperate urge to go to the wilderness and hunt monsters for points. But the school wouldn't let a Tier 1 martial artist leave the city. I was still trying to think of an excuse to convince my teachers when the disaster struck. It was July 7th. We were in the middle of class when a high-pitched, piercing siren cut through the air. It echoed across the entire city. My teacher's face turned pale instantly. Then, a firm, booming voice came over the intercom. "Attention! A beast tide is approaching. All martial artists are ordered to report to the nearest city wall to assist in defense. All citizens must stay indoors. Return home or find the nearest shelter immediately." The announcement played 3 times. The city transformed into a war machine in seconds. Aircraft roared overhead, flying toward the outskirts. From the windows, I saw figures leaping across rooftops and cars racing through the streets, all heading for the walls. The school staff immediately began organizing students to head to the underground shelters. Because we had practiced drills, there was no panic. However, the martial arts students were different. We were being called to the front. Shanghai Polytechnic was in District 20, right next to the Southwestern Defense Zone. Principal Huagang led the way. About 50 teachers followed. Many I didn't recognize, proving that more of our faculty were secret martial artists than I realized. We piled into a fleet of buses and sped toward the southwest wall. I had volunteered to go. Usually, new initiates stayed behind, but I couldn't miss this. The atmosphere inside the bus was suffocating. No one spoke. The teachers handed out gear based on our rank. I received a set of F-rank armor and a standard issue blade. It wasn't the best, and it was only a loan, but it was better than nothing. When we got within a kilometer of the wall, I felt the ground trembling. The roar of cannons, the screams of men, and the guttural howls of monsters merged into a deafening wall of sound. Suddenly, the principal's phone rang. He listened for a second and gasped. What? A level 2 tide. He hung up and ordered us off the bus. We were in a restricted zone now, crawling with armed soldiers. We had to go the rest of the way on foot. Students, the principal said, his voice grave. Follow Teacher Chu and Teacher Chun. Protect yourselves. I want every single one of you back at school alive. With that, he stepped into the air and soared toward the wall. Holy crap, someone whispered. The principal can fly? He's a Tier 7 powerhouse. Quiet. Teacher Chu barked. Tier 2 students, follow me to the top of the wall. Tier 1 students, stay below and assist the army in killing any monsters that break through. As we marched forward, my palms began to sweat against the hilt of my blade. They gave us wristbands to track our kills and record our merit points. Chow, are you scared? Zhang Dali asked. His voice was shaking. Of course I am, I admitted. It's my first time, but being scared won't help. Stay sharp, Dali. We stick together. We reached the base of the massive wall. It was dozens of meters high, a concrete mountain that offered a small sense of security. We were stationed about 200 meters back, behind a line of simple fortifications. I looked up. The battle on the ramparts was chaotic. Further out, beyond the gates, I could see powerful martial artists locked in life-or-death duels with massive beasts. Blood was everywhere. Stretcher bearers rushed past us, carrying wounded soldiers and martial artists. Some were missing arms, others were missing legs. The reality of the world hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a classroom anymore. This was a slaughterhouse. The scene was horrific. I saw soldiers with their abdomens ripped open, their intestines spilling out onto the cold ground. It was a bloody, desperate struggle. It hit me then that humanity only survived because so many people were willing to throw their lives away to hold the line. The pressure on the walls must have been too much. After about half an hour, the defense buckled. A wave of monsters, Tier 1s and unranked beasts, started pouring through the gaps. I saw ironhide pigs, salt-eating rats, mad bloodhounds, and bloodthirsty demon wolves. My scalp went numb just looking at the sheer number of them. The army below the wall opened fire immediately. Monsters fell one after another under the hail of bullets, but there were just too many. A few managed to break through the line. I watched in horror as soldiers were torn apart. Most of them weren't awakened. They relied entirely on their guns. Once a monster got close, it was over in seconds. Go! I yelled, and the rest of the standby martial artists charged with me. There were hundreds of us, students, hunting team members, merchants, even government officials. In that moment, titles didn't matter. We were all just defenders of humanity. A mad bloodhound lunged at me. You can usually tell their strength by their size. If they're under a meter, they're unranked. Between 1 and 2 meters, they're Tier 1. The big ones, 3 to 4 meters long, are Tier 3 nightmares. But size isn't always accurate. To be sure, you have to check their diamond scales. Every monster has them hidden somewhere on their body. The number of ridges on the scale tells you their true tier. The government collects these scales as proof of merit. I heard rumors that some beasts had evolved even further, awakening supernatural abilities just like us. We called those variant beasts. They were faster, stronger, and much more dangerous. This hound was small, likely unranked. I dodged its snap, my blade flashing in a clean arc. Its head hit the dirt before its body did. I glanced at my internal system panel. Origin points, +5. My heart jumped. So, killing monsters really did grant me points. This was my chance. I had wasted too much time and was already lagging behind my peers. I needed to grow, and I needed to do it now. I began weaving through the battlefield, specifically hunting unranked monsters. It was the most efficient way to farm points. One strike, one kill. By the time I took down my 10th salt-eating rat, I felt a heavy, predatory gaze lock onto me. A Tier 1 Mad Bloodhound let out a bone-chilling roar and charged. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to hold back anymore. Shadow Shield, activate. I thought. Shadow Piercer. I became a blur. We crossed paths in a flash. I felt my blade sink deep into its neck, leaving a gaping wound. The beast stumbled, heavily injured, but I didn't give it a chance to recover. I spun around and delivered a final, decisive slash. The Tier 1 Hound collapsed. Origin points, +16. I checked my stats. Name, Su Chao. Level, Tier 1 Martial Artist. Talent, Shadow Shield, rank. Constitution, 15. Spirit, 11. Origin points, 83. Skills, Shadow Piercer, Basic, Beginner. Windbreaker Slash, Basic, Beginner. I did the math. 10 unranked kills gave me 62 points, meaning each was worth less than 10. A Tier 1 was worth between 10 and 20. My constitution had bumped up to 15 naturally, likely from my breathing exercises and recent training. I saw 2+ signs next to my stats. I needed more power. I spotted Zhang Dali nearby, locked in a struggle with a beast. I rushed over, finished off his target, and grabbed his arm. Dali, I'm on the verge of a breakthrough, I hissed. Cover me. Dali stared at me like I was crazy. Now? Chow, there are monsters everywhere. Just trust me. It's important, I said. Let's draw a couple of monsters toward that corner over there. We can't just disappear, or it'll look suspicious. We each baited a Tier 1 monster and fought our way toward a secluded alcove. Once we were out of the main line of sight, I went all out and slaughtered both beasts. My breath was heavy, and a shallow gash on my left shoulder stung, but I didn't care. I sat down with my back against the wall. Dali stood guard, his eyes darting around nervously. Upgrade, I commanded. A flood of energy surged into my body. It was violent and intoxicating. My constitution climbed rapidly, but it hit a wall at 19. It wouldn't budge. I realized my spirit stat was probably holding me back from reaching Tier 2. Fine. I spent 10 points to push Windbreaker Slash to the beginner level. In total, I burned 50 points. Name, Su Chao. Level, Tier 1 Martial Artist. Constitution, 19. Spirit, 11. Origin points, 33. I stood up, feeling the raw power vibrating in my muscles. I felt like I actually had a chance to survive this nightmare. The whole process had only taken a few minutes. Dali looked at me, his jaw dropping. You're done? Just like that. Let's go, I said, heading back into the fray. With my boosted stats, Tier 1 monsters were no longer a threat. I was ending them in less than 5 moves. With the 10% power boost from my Windbreaker Slash, my lethality was hovering right at the edge of Tier 2. I lost count of how many beasts I killed. I saved Dali's life 3 more times as we pushed through the sea of fur and claws. Eventually, the weight of my blade started to feel like lead. My arms were screaming. I blinked, clearing the blood from my eyes, and realized the space around me was empty. The wave had been broken. The pressure on everyone eased, but the cost was high. The ground was littered with the bodies of soldiers and martial artists. Medics were already sprinting into the red zone. People started turning to look at me. I was a sight to behold, covered in black armor drenched in gore, holding a notched blade that was literally dripping red. I saw a flash of fear in their eyes, followed by deep, unspoken respect. I was exhausted. I caught Dali's eye and gave him a nod. We found a quiet corner and sat down to meditate. We weren't the only ones. Most of the surviving martial artists were doing the same, trying to recover their energy before the next wave hit. An officer noticed us and immediately ordered a squad of soldiers to form a protective circle around the recovering fighters. I closed my eyes and pulled up my panel one more time. Name, Su Chao. Level, Tier 1 Martial Artist. My Shadow Shield talent was still at level 1, and my constitution sat at 19. My spirit was at 11, But the most important number on my panel was my origin points, 1,353. I also had my Shadow Piercer and Windbreaker / techniques at entry level. Looking at that massive stack of origin points, my heart started thumping against my ribs. I wanted to jump up and scream with joy. I was rich. For the first time since this started, I felt like a total nouveau riche. I had to keep my face like stone, though. It wasn't the right time or place to act like a lunatic. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. I needed a plan. The smartest move was to dump points into my basic stats to hit Tier 2. That would give me the biggest immediate power boost. I tried to increase my spirit first. My heart skipped a beat when I saw a single point cost me 100 origin points. I gritted my teeth and pushed through the pain, spending 800 points to bring my spirit up to 20. Suddenly, a sharp, stabbing pain shot through my skull. I nearly cried out. I had hit my limit. My mind couldn't handle any more growth without time to adapt. Seeing 900 points vanish just like that hurt. Spirit was incredibly expensive to level up. If other martial artists heard me complaining, they'd probably kill me. Most people have to meditate for years or pray they find some legendary treasure to increase their spirit. I was doing it in seconds. Next, I spent 10 points to bring my constitution up to 20. Just like that, I was officially a Tier 2 martial artist. Having a cheat code felt amazing. I checked my status again. My talent was still ready for an upgrade. I didn't hesitate. I clicked the button, watched 100 points disappear, and saw the text change. My Shadow Shield had evolved into a D-rank talent, Blink. I was ecstatic. This confirmed my theory. I could actually evolve my talent rank. If I kept this up, I could eventually surpass the geniuses with S-rank abilities. Of course, I knew the cost would eventually become astronomical, but that was a problem for future me. I spent another 200 points to push both Shadow Piercer and Windbreaker / to the Submastery stage. Then, I looked at my remaining 143 points. I dumped almost all of them into Constitution, pushing it to its limit at 29 points. The moment I did, a massive surge of energy flooded my body. It was so intense that the air around me hummed. The nearby martial artists snapped their heads toward me, their eyes wide with shock. They realized I was breaking through right there on the battlefield. They looked envious, but they eventually looked away. Breakthroughs in the heat of combat weren't unheard of, even if mine was a bit loud. When the dust settled, my panel looked brand new. I was a Tier 2 martial artist with the Blink talent, 29 Constitution, and 20 Spirit. I only had 53 origin points left. I felt powerful, but I also felt broke. I had just burned through a fortune in the blink of an eye. This system was a bottomless pit. I stood up and stretched. Most of the others were still meditating, so I walked to a pile of discarded gear. I found a sturdy longsword left behind by a fallen fighter and picked it up. I needed to test this new strength. As I swung the blade, I felt a slight lag. My constitution was much higher than my spirit, which meant my mind wasn't perfectly in sync with my body yet. It was like someone had suddenly installed a high-performance engine in an old car. I could feel the raw power, roughly 2,900 kilograms of force, but I could only harness about 2,800 of it. I needed more combat to bridge the gap. I practiced my upgraded techniques next. At the submastery level, my understanding of the moves had shifted. Shadow Piercer was now faster and more unpredictable, its damage bonus jumping from 10% to 20%. Windbreaker / was even more terrifying. It let out a sharp sonic boom as it cut the air, also sporting a 20% boost. With my base strength, I was now hitting with over 3,000 kilograms of force. I was a powerhouse among Tier 2 fighters. In my class back at school, only a handful of top-tier students had ever reached submastery in their techniques. Most were still stuck at entry level. I felt a surge of confidence. I was about to test my new blink ability when the roar of cannons shook the ground again. I looked up. A fresh wave of monsters was pouring through the breach. It had been less than 20 minutes since I sat down. I didn't waste a second. I gripped my sword and charged. The other martial artists scrambled to their feet, joining the fray. The slaughter began anew. With my increased stats, Tier 1 monsters were a joke. I didn't even use my full strength. I focused on efficiency, using just enough force to kill each beast while saving my stamina. From a distance, I must have looked like a black-armored ghost, weaving through the chaos and leaving a trail of carcasses behind. I targeted the Tier 1 beasts specifically. They were the biggest threat to the regular soldiers. Every time I saw a classmate or a soldier in trouble, I stepped in. I saved several people from my own martial arts class, leaving them staring at my back in total shock. They couldn't understand how I had become this strong, this fast. I didn't care what they thought. I was too busy watching the notifications pop up on my vision. Kill a rock rat, 14 points. Kill a bloodhound, 16 points. Kill an ironhide pig, 15 points. It was like a game. Then, I spotted a bloodthirsty demon wolf. 18 points. Wait, I muttered, my eyes locking onto the beast. This was going to be fun. When I saw the notification for 18 points pop up after killing a bloodthirsty demon wolf, my eyes lit up. I started hunting them specifically. It was the best return on investment for my energy, and they were the biggest threat on the field. I didn't realize that as the pile of wolf carcasses grew, a pair of blood-red eyes was tracking my every move. Not far from where I fought, two middle-aged men were moving through the monster tide. One carried a saber, the other a spear. They moved with terrifying ease, leaving trails of dead beasts in their wake. They looked like they were taking a casual stroll. Old Chun, the one with the spear, said, grinning, "Your strength has improved again. You must be close to the late stages of Tier 5. Old Chun, the saber user, sighed. "Don't start with me, Old Huang. We were equals back in the day, but you've already surpassed me. You hit late Tier 5 already, didn't you?" Old Huang gave a smug, greasy smile. "Just a stroke of luck. I recently broke through." Old Chun looked a bit salty. "Must be nice at Manhwa Martial Arts University. A specialized school really does have better resources. Who's to blame for that?" Old Huang teased. "I told you to come with me, but you insisted on going to Shanghai Polytechnic." "I was tricked by Hua Gang," Old Chun grumbled. "I owed him a favor and couldn't say no. Anyway, let's talk business. Huang, don't you think this beast tide is strange?" Old Huang looked at the endless stream of monsters pouring through the breach. "Yeah, usually, these are Tier 3 tides or smaller. A Tier 2 tide of this scale hasn't happened in 10 years. Old Chin decapitated an ironhide pig with a casual flick of his blade. His face grew serious. A Tier 2 tide of this size means there's at least one Tier 9 beast pulling the strings from the shadows. There are probably several Tier 8s on the front lines. We're looking at millions of monsters." Old Huang's playful expression vanished, replaced by pain. "I don't even want to think about how many people we're going to lose. Shanghai City is going to bleed today. This section of the wall isn't even the main focus. I heard the West Gate is a nightmare. Humanity struggles to produce even one martial artist," Old Chin whispered. "But these monsters breed and evolve so fast. If it wasn't for our top-tier powerhouses, we'd be..." He stopped himself and looked up. "The battle on the wall isn't going well. They're going to call us up soon. I wonder if the big shots have moved yet," Old Huang muttered. "If they can kill that Tier 9 leader, this tide will break. People can stop dying. That's above our pay grade," Old Chin said. Then he pointed toward the students. "By the way, your Shanghai Polytechnic kids aren't bad this year." "Don't patronize me," Old Chin replied. "We know there's a gap between us and specialized schools." "I'm serious," Old Huang insisted. "Look at that kid in the black armor with the saber. His strikes are ruthless, his efficiency is insane, and he's conserving his stamina perfectly. His technique level is at least submastery. He's a real talent." Old Chin followed his gaze and nodded. "That's Su Chao. He just awakened. The kid has a gift for combat." Suddenly, a booming voice echoed across the battlefield. "All martial artists Tier 2 and above, move to the top of the wall for support." The two men stopped talking. They glanced at the students, decided they could handle the remaining stragglers, and sprinted toward the wall. Several other powerful figures joined them, disappearing into the smoke. Meanwhile, I was in a flow state. Every time a monster fell, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had never felt this clear-headed. For 3 years, since the accident that took my original powers and ruined my father's health, I had lived under a mountain of pressure. It was like a volcano waiting to erupt. This slaughter was exactly the release I needed. The mental weight was vanishing. My mind felt sharp, transparent, and fast. But I got too comfortable. "Chow, look out." A scream snapped me out of my thoughts. I felt a gust of foul, stinking wind rushing at my side. I reacted on instinct, throwing my saber up to block. Clang! The impact felt like being hit by a speeding truck. I was sent flying several meters through the air. I hit the dirt and rolled, trying to bleed off the momentum. When I scrambled to my feet, my right hand was bleeding and my arm was throbbing with a dull, heavy pain. I looked at my attacker. It was a bloodthirsty demon wolf, but it wasn't like the others. It was 2 meters long with brownish-red fur, glowing crimson eyes, and jagged bone spikes protruding from its spine. This was a Tier 2 variant. It had been hiding in the crowd, waiting for me to slip up. The wolf growled and lunged again. Before it could reach me, a figure crashed into its side. Crack! The wolf swiped a massive claw, and the figure was sent tumbling away like a broken doll. Dolly! I screamed. Jiang Dolly had tried to intercept the beast to give me time to recover. He was struggling to stand, coughing up a thick spray of blood. I could see deep, jagged claw marks across his stomach. My vision went red. A white-hot rage surged from my chest to my head. You damn animal, I hissed. I'm going to tear you apart. I gripped my saber and triggered my blink ability. Since reaching Tier 2, I had mastered the timing. My speed doubled instantly. My base speed was already 47 meters per second. Doubled. I was faster than most Tier 3 martial artists. I became a blur. The wolf didn't even have time to blink before my blade carved a deep red line across its flank. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was deep. The wolf realized I wasn't the easy prey it thought I was. It turned toward me, saliva dripping from its fangs, its eyes locked onto mine with pure, murderous hatred. It let out a deafening roar and charged. The bloodthirsty demon wolf lunged again. I dodged using my blink ability, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I skidded to a halt, I looked down at my hand and cursed. The blade was ruined. It was an F-rank alloy saber I'd scavenged from the battlefield, and the Tier 2 beast had snapped it like a dry twig. The half-length of metal left in my grip was covered in spiderweb cracks. It was useless. F-rank gear just wasn't meant for monsters this strong. I tossed the broken hilt aside and reached for the dagger at my waist. I didn't want to use it. It was a Tier 1 alloy weapon, but more importantly, it was the gift my father gave me for my 18th birthday. It was my most prized possession, and I was terrified of breaking it. But I didn't have a choice. I had to kill this thing. If I'd been using a Tier 1 weapon from the start, that last strike would have done real damage instead of just grazing it. My blood ran cold as I watched the wolf. The wound on its neck was already closing. Within seconds, the bleeding stopped entirely. This wasn't normal. Tier 1 and Tier 2 monsters are usually driven by raw instinct, but this one was different. It knew how to hide in the pack. It knew how to wait for the perfect moment to ambush me. It was smart. I couldn't drag this out. My energy was draining, and I couldn't keep my abilities active forever. Without my blink ability, the wolf was actually faster than me. I decided to go all in. The wolf leaped, its jaws wide. I didn't retreat. I activated Shadow Piercer, my primary weapon technique, and combined it with a burst of blink speed. I slid underneath the beast's rising body and drove my dagger upward, aiming straight for its heart. Squelch! I felt the blade sink deep. A surge of triumph washed over me. I'd hit it. The wolf let out a pained whimper and crashed to the ground. I thought it was over, but the damn thing scrambled back to its feet almost instantly. It was heavily wounded, but not dead. Even now, I could see its flesh knitting back together. It was weaker, though, much weaker. I didn't give it another second. I pushed myself to the limit, weaving my abilities together in a frantic dance of steel. It took several more minutes of grueling combat before I finally managed to hack its head clean off. I wasn't taking any chances with its regeneration this time. A notification flashed in my mind, plus 49 origin points. That confirmed it. The monster was finally dead. I should have been happy, but I felt sick. This fight had been a disaster. My long saber was destroyed, and my father's dagger now had a visible notch in the edge. I exhaled a shaky breath, gritting my teeth. Once this beast tide was over, I needed a real weapon. This constant equipment failure was going to get me killed. Worse, the energy cost had been insane. Killing this one Tier 2 variant felt more exhausting than slaying 20 Tier 1 monsters. If I'd spent that energy on the smaller ones, I would have earned triple the origin points. This was a total loss. I looked at my system panel, hoping for a new ability. Nothing. My theory about gaining powers from every special monster was wrong. Maybe killing that shadow rat earlier had just been a fluke. Or maybe this wolf's regeneration wasn't a true ability the system could recognize. I started to turn away, but something caught my eye on the wolf's corpse. I knelt down, narrowing my eyes at a patch of skin near its front leg. There was text tattooed there. Experimental Subject 093. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind crawled up my spine. This wasn't a natural monster. Someone was experimenting on these creatures. If this was Subject 93, how many more were out there? Who was doing this? And what were they trying to create? I felt a surge of directionless rage. I spat on the wolf's carcass, trying to vent the frustration bubbling in my chest. It didn't help much, but it felt good. I turned my focus back to the battlefield and headed toward Jiangdali. I'd seen him get back up earlier, so I knew he wasn't dead, but I needed to check on him. I found him limping near the edge of the fray, picking off low-level monsters. "Dolly, you okay?" I called out. "Don't worry about me, Chow," he gasped, leaning on his weapon. "Just a scratch. I'll be fine after a few days of rest." "You scared the hell out of me when you flew back like that." Dolly tried to laugh, but it turned into a wince. "You're overthinking it. Did you forget my talent? My mountain armor protected me. That mutt couldn't kill me in one hit even if it tried." He was acting tough, but I saw the way his face contorted in pain every time he moved. "Stop acting like a hero," I said, grabbing his shoulder. "Get to the medical tent. I'll handle things here. I'm going to wipe these bastards out." Dolly didn't argue. He knew his internal organs were battered. I escorted him through the military lines to the field hospital. As we reached the entrance, I stopped. "Dolly." He turned back, looking confused. "Yeah." I looked him straight in the eye. "Thanks." He rolled his eyes and gave me a dismissive wave. "Get lost, man. You're being dramatic." He disappeared into the tent, leaving me alone. I sat down for a moment to catch my breath. The fight with the wolf had drained me, and my body was starting to feel the strain of overusing my abilities. I opened my system panel to check my progress. Name: Su Chao level, Tier 2 martial artist talent. Blink, Earth rank, plus physique, 29 mental strength, 20 origin points, 2168 skills, Shadow Piercer, minor success, plus Windbreaker, minor success, plus. My stats were still locked. My body needed a few more days to adjust to the recent upgrades, but I saw a glowing plus sign next to my talent. Over 2,000 points. It was time. I didn't hesitate. I clicked upgrade. A wave of clarity washed over me, sharper and deeper than anything I'd felt before. My understanding of space and shadows shifted, reaching a new level of mastery. Name: Su Chao level, Tier 2 martial artist talent. Shadow Clone, C rank, physique, 29 mental strength, 20 origin points, 1168 skills, Shadow Piercer, minor success, plus Windbreaker, minor success, plus. Blink had evolved. I wasn't just moving fast anymore. I was becoming the shadow itself. I stared at my system panel, watching the text flicker. My talent had evolved into C-rank Shadow Clone, and my origin points had dropped by a solid 1,000. It was a heavy price, but I knew it was worth it. As a Tier 2 martial artist with a C-rank talent, I was now sitting comfortably in the upper middle tier of my class. In fact, even in a standard martial arts university, C-rank was considered respectable. The higher the rank, the rarer they became. From what I knew, B-rank was the mark of a top-tier student. A-rank. Those were the true geniuses, the ones universities fought over. As for S-rank and above, they were legends, treasures that every major power wanted to hide away in their vaults. I'd never even seen one in person. Maybe I just wasn't at a high enough level to access that kind of information yet. Still, I was satisfied. In just a few days, I had closed a gap that took others years of grueling training to bridge. I looked back at the panel. The only things left to upgrade were my 2 basic martial arts. I didn't hesitate and poured another 1,000 points into Windbreaker. I felt a sharp pang of regret as my origin points plummeted again, but it vanished the moment the knowledge hit me. A flood of memories and muscle memory rushed into my brain. It felt like I had spent decades as a swordsman, practicing the same strike over and over, thousands of times a day. Every nuance, every shift in weight, every breath, it all clicked. My understanding of the blade reached a new depth. I felt like I could kill a Tier 2 monster with a casual swing. There was something more, too, a faint, intimidating pressure attached to my blade. I realized I had reached the great success stage. I was starting to touch the edge of blade intent. If I could push this basic skill to the perfection stage, my combat power would skyrocket. I checked my updated stats. Name, Su Chao, level, Tier 2 martial artist, talent, shadow clone, C rank, physique, 29, mental strength, 20, origin points, 168, skills, shadow piercer, minor success, windbreaker, great success. My points were almost gone. 2,000 points, earned through hours of slaughter, had bought me only 2 upgrades. But the results were undeniable. My attack power had increased by 50%. With my physical strength at 2,900 kilograms, my total output was now hovering at the threshold of a Tier 3 martial artist. I finally felt like I had a real chance at survival. The only problem was that these upgrades were getting more expensive. I needed more kills. I sat cross-legged for a while to recover my energy. Once I felt my strength return, I found a military officer and signed out a Grade 1 alloy longsword. It was time to get back to work. Down by the base of the city walls, the monsters were thinning out. Maybe the situation on top of the walls had changed, but I didn't care about the big picture. I was a new martial artist, and this was the perfect chance to farm points in relative safety. Seeing the numbers drop made me anxious. I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. I threw myself back into the fray, stealing kills wherever I could. The other martial artists watched me with growing respect. They probably thought I was some heroic student, a young man with a sense of duty, pushing himself to the limit for the sake of humanity. In reality, I was just hungry for points. Eventually, the ground level was cleared out. I turned my eyes toward the top of the Great Wall. Many of my Tier 2 classmates were up there, and I knew I wasn't weaker than them anymore. I started making my way up the long stone staircase. The wall was massive, but as a Tier 2 martial artist, the climb didn't take long. I moved cautiously, saving my energy and killing the occasional monster that tried to leap down at me. I felt like a lone traveler heading against the tide. 10 minutes later, I stepped onto the top of the wall. The sight was overwhelming. It was a meat grinder. Human martial artists and monsters were locked in a desperate struggle everywhere I looked. Beyond the wall, a sea of monsters stretched into the distance. It was the kind of sight that could make a person feel utterly powerless. Monsters died by the hundreds, but more kept pouring in from the wilderness. The roar of gunfire and artillery was deafening. The Shanghai-based defense force was out in full force. Most of them weren't awakened, but their coordinated fire and heavy weapons were doing the most damage to the massive swarms. They kept the bulk of the horde at bay, but the ones that slipped through the wall of fire had to be handled by martial artists. The soldiers were brave, but they died quickly if a monster got too close. They were the real heroes here. I hadn't been on the wall for more than a minute when a Tier 2 Ironhide boar charged at me. I raised my new alloy sword to meet it. I didn't want to stand out too much yet, so I held back, tangling with the beast while I scanned the battlefield to get my bearings. Just as I was about to finish the boar, a scream pierced through the chaos nearby. I looked over and recognized a classmate named Zhang Yu. He was a Tier 2 martial artist with an Earth-rank talent, but he had only recently broken through. He had been holding his own against a salt rat, but a blood-sucking demon wolf had caught him off guard. His left arm was gone, severed at the shoulder. Blood was pouring down his side, but he was still gripping his sword with his right hand, facing down both monsters. He was cornered. No one else was close enough to help. I slashed the Ironhide boar across the flank to back it off, then activated my talent. My speed surged. In a blur of movement, I flashed across the stone floor and appeared directly in front of Zhang Yu. My blade rang out as I blocked the wolf's lethal strike. "Thanks, you saved my life," Zhang Yu gasped, his face deathly pale. I nodded but didn't speak. This wasn't the time for a chat. Zhang Yu was heavily wounded and wouldn't last much longer. I decided to stop holding back. I unleashed everything. My C-rank shadow clone talent flared to life as I combined it with my great success windbreaker technique. The Tier 2 demon wolf didn't even see it coming. The beast before me was a blood-sucking demon wolf, though it wasn't as strong as the one I had killed earlier. It was furious that a human had dared to interfere with its meal. It bared its fangs, ready to tear me apart. But just as it lunged, 3 identical versions of me appeared out of thin air. The wolf froze. Its tiny brain couldn't process what it was seeing. That moment of confusion was all I needed. I felt a sharp sting as my blade sliced through its neck. The world tilted for the beast as its head left its shoulders. It lost consciousness before it even hit the ground. I was satisfied with my current combat power. By combining my shadow clone talent with my great success windbreaker technique, I could briefly touch the threshold of a Tier 3 martial artist. Killing a standard Tier 2 wolf was easy work. I deactivated my talent immediately. The energy drain was significant, and I needed to conserve my strength. This was a battlefield. Anything could happen, and I couldn't afford to be empty. Using only my physical strength and the windbreaker technique, I quickly dispatched the salt rat that was still harassing Zhang Yu. I didn't stop there. I cleared out several Tier 1 monsters lingering nearby until the immediate area was safe. Zhang Yu collapsed onto the stone floor, gasping for air. Now that the danger had passed, he finally had a chance to look at his savior. I knelt beside him and pulled out a hemostatic potion from my pack, applying it to his mangled shoulder. "Wait, Su Chao." Zhang Yu stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. He remembered me as the junior who had only recently awakened and joined the martial arts class. He couldn't wrap his head around how I had become this powerful. "It's me, Senior Zhang," I said quietly. "You're badly hurt. You need to get to the medical station under the wall immediately." I looked around the blood-stained floor, hoping to find his severed arm to see if it could be reattached. It was gone. It had likely been devoured by the monsters during the struggle. "I'm useless now," Zhang Yu said, his voice thick with grief as he looked at his empty sleeve. "I'll only be a burden here. Su Chao, can you get me to the elevators? There are people there who handle the wounded." "Of course," I replied. I helped him up, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. To distract him from the pain, I asked, "Do you know how the other students and teachers are doing?" Zhang Yu took a shaky breath. "I heard Principal Hua and the other high-level experts went outside the city to deal with the Beast Kings. The fighting out there is too intense for us to even get close. Our teachers are about 1 kilometer further down the wall where the monsters are stronger. As for our classmates," he paused, his expression darkening. "A few were injured and sent down already. But Feng Luan and Luo Guangrong, they're dead." My heart sank. "What? Senior Feng and Senior Luo are gone?" I was stunned. I wasn't close to them, but we were part of the same class. Feng Luan's strength was similar to Zhang Yu's, but Luo Guangrong had been at the peak of Tier 2. To think they had already fallen in this battle made the reality of the war hit home. They were in the prime of their lives, with bright futures ahead of them, all cut short in an instant. We didn't speak for the rest of the walk. I channeled my grief and anger into my blade, violently cutting down every monster that crossed our path. Soon, we reached the elevator zone. This area was heavily fortified and guarded by high-level martial artists since it served as the main transport vein for supplies and personnel. Once I saw Zhang Yu safely loaded into the elevator, I prepared to head back out. I decided to stay near this sector. Having a powerful expert nearby made it a much safer place to hunt. I walked to the edge of the wall and looked down. My stomach turned. Below me, thousands of monsters were literally piling on top of each other, forming a living ramp of flesh and claws to reach the top. That was how they were scaling such a massive fortification. In the distance, the sky was a chaotic mess of explosions and fire. Human experts and fighter jets were intercepting swarms of flying monsters. Massive laser batteries on the city walls fired beams of light that disintegrated anything they touched. The high-ranking officials of Shanghai Base had clearly prepared for this. They knew the destructive power of aerial beasts and were keeping them at bay. Seeing the organized defense made me feel slightly better. The situation was still under control. I cleared my mind and began a new round of hunting. I was selective now, focusing on Tier 1 and weaker Tier 2 monsters. They provided the best value for my origin points with the least risk. It wasn't all smooth sailing. A few times, I found myself cornered, but I used my shadow clones to trick the beasts and escape. Eventually, exhaustion started to set in. I retreated to the elevator area to meditate and took a recovery potion. Once my energy returned, I went back out. I thought the battle would continue like this, a slow grind of attrition, until a sudden wave of panic erupted nearby. A group of powerful monsters had broken through the perimeter. Leading them was a massive, lizard-like creature that breathed actual fire. Everywhere it went, soldiers and martial artists were turned into human torches. It was a Tier 6 magma lizard. But it wasn't alone. Perched on its scaly shoulder was a small white fox with 5 tails swaying behind it. Its jade-green eyes glowed with an eerie light. This was a Tier 5 illusion fox. The monsters around them seemed possessed, charging at us with suicidal frenzy. Meanwhile, the human defenders were acting strange. Their reactions were sluggish. Some stood perfectly still, as if paralyzed by a spell, only to be slaughtered seconds later. I was further away, but I suddenly felt a cold, intrusive force clawing at my mind, trying to take control. Just as my vision began to blur, the system panel in my head hummed, swallowing the mental intrusion whole. I didn't hesitate. I triggered my shadow clone and bolted. A split second later, a wave of heat from the magma lizard's breath washed over the area. Even with my speed, the aftershock scorched my back. The pain was searing. Cold sweat poured down my face as I reached a safe distance. That was too close. One beast controlled the mind, the other incinerated the body. The defenders in that sector were being wiped out. You filthy beasts. Die. A roar thundered across the battlefield, loud enough to make my ears ring. A long spear streaked through the air like a bolt of lightning, slamming directly into the magma lizard's flank. The mental fog lifted instantly. The paralyzed martial artists snapped out of their daze and began to flee in every direction. A blur of motion descended from the sky. The high-level expert guarding this sector had finally arrived. I didn't blame the high-level expert for the delay. He had been pulled away to intercept a different high-tier beast nearby. In the 2 breaths it took him to finish that fight and get back here, our sector had been turned into a slaughterhouse. It felt like a setup. The monsters had baited him away specifically to destroy this transport corridor. As the expert returned, he didn't waste a second. He thrust his spear, the force of it vibrating through the air, and instantly obliterated the Tier 6 magma lizard. Then, he threw a single punch. The shockwave rippled outward, killing or blowing back every monster in the vicinity. Among them was the Tier 5 illusion fox. It slammed into the ground just a few meters from my feet. I stared at the beast, stunned. It lay there motionless, blood leaking from its mouth. The power of a Tier 7 expert was terrifying. 2 moves. That was all it took to end threats that seemed godlike to us. Even more impressive was his control. He killed the beasts without damaging the city walls. I turned to leave and hunt the remaining stragglers, but a movement caught my eye. The fox's eyelid flickered. My heart skipped a beat. The damn thing was still alive. I watched it closely, holding my breath. It was trying to open its eyes. A chill ran down my spine. I knew how dangerous this creature's mental attacks were. But I also saw an opportunity. I gripped my blade and crept toward it. Before it could fully wake, I lunged. I drove my long blade straight through its eye socket. The blade sank deep with a wet crunch. The fox gave one final shudder and went limp. This time, it was dead for good. Suddenly, my system panel flared to life. Obtained origin points, 888. A lucky number, but that wasn't the best part. I looked at the talent column and froze. My heart nearly hammered out of my chest. New talent. I have insight, grade A. An A-rank talent. I wanted to scream with joy. As far as I knew, even the top martial arts classes at my school didn't have anyone with an A-rank talent. The highest was B rank. This was a literal fortune falling from the sky. Risking my life on the wall had finally paid off. I took a breath to calm down and decided to test it. I activated the Eye of Insight. The world shifted. Everything became impossibly sharp. I could see the faint flow of energy in the air. Not far away, a Tier 2 bloodhound was fighting a human martial artist. Through my new eyes, their movements looked like they were in slow motion. Red markers appeared on the monster, highlighting its fatal weaknesses and openings. I also felt a surge of mental power. I could now cast illusions on anyone with weaker willpower than mine. It was incredible, but the drain was massive. I could feel my mental energy evaporating. This was a trump card, something to be used only in a crisis. I glanced toward the high-level expert in the distance and reflexively used the skill on him. My eyes instantly burned, as if I had stared directly into the sun. I shut the talent off with a hiss of pain. Huh, interesting little guy, the expert muttered. He seemed to feel my gaze. He looked over, surprised to see a mere Tier 2 student, but he didn't say anything more. I made a mental note. Never use this on someone that much stronger than me. He was likely at the peak of Tier 7. With the expert back in position, the corridor was cleared quickly. Medics rushed to move the wounded and the dead, while the rest of us mopped up the remaining monsters. With my eye of insight, my kill count soared over the next hour. Suddenly, a series of roars echoed from outside the city. The tide of monsters began to shift. They turned and fled back toward the wilderness. Even the ones on the walls jumped down to escape. They're retreating. The beast tide is over. Cheers erupted everywhere. Soldiers and martial artists hugged each other, weeping and laughing. We had survived. I felt the urge to celebrate too. I turned to the person next to me to offer a hug, but I stopped mid-motion. It was a girl, likely a student from South China Martial Arts University. She saw my awkward, hovering hands and let out a genuine laugh. She reached out her hand instead. Hi, I'm Baijia, junior at South China Martial Arts. You're pretty amazing. You're a student too, right? I saw you taking down a lot of monsters. I shook her hand and smiled. Su Chao, junior at Shanghai Polytechnic. She paused, her eyes widening. Wait, you're from a liberal arts college. But you're so strong. What kind of talent did you awaken? Why didn't you go to a martial arts school? I didn't awaken in high school, I explained. It only happened after I started university. Bai Jia was impressive, a Tier 3 martial artist with a B-rank precision talent. We talked for a while and exchanged contact info, promising to team up for a hunt in the wasteland sometime. Eventually, it was time to regroup. The atmosphere at the assembly point was heavy. Our instructor, Chu Xian, was counting heads. We were missing people. Some students were bleeding, others were crying quietly. Even in a world used to death, losing friends never got easier. The others saw me coming from the wall and assumed I had just arrived late to help with the cleanup. No one was in the mood to ask questions. We headed down to the base of the wall to register our battle merits. Our wristbands had recorded every kill. The officials would use that data to calculate our rewards and the market value of the monsters we'd slain. I was looking forward to the payout. It would be enough to help my family and finally buy some decent gear of my own. After returning my borrowed military saber, I stood in line, waiting for my new life to truly begin. I handed back the borrowed military saber and looked at my own gear. I was down to a single, chipped dagger. My equipment couldn't keep up with my power anymore. We piled into buses to head back to school. On the way, the silence was broken by the sound of phones buzzing. Everyone was calling home to tell their families they were safe. I called my parents. They exhaled in relief when they heard my voice, begging me to stay safe and not take unnecessary risks. Suddenly, a student shouted, "Look at the news. Look at the video." I pulled out my phone and joined the rest of them. The screen showed a sight that stopped my breath. A man was walking through the sky. He was surrounded by crackling purple lightning, holding a sword in one hand and the massive carcass of a fox-like beast in the other. As he flew over the wasteland, flocks of flying monsters scattered in terror. The dead beast was enormous, with 9 distinct, flowing tails. Even through the screen, the creature felt terrifying. "It's Grandmaster Hua," someone yelled. "Hua Jiyuan. He's a Tier 9 peak powerhouse with lightning abilities." "Is that the 9-tailed demon fox?" another student asked. "The news says it was the one that started this whole beast tide." The realization hit the bus. The tide hadn't just ended. The king had been slain. I stared at the man in the video. This wasn't the first time I'd seen him. 3 years ago, my family's merchant caravan was attacked in the wilderness. A powerful warrior had saved us as he passed by. Back then, I didn't even know his name. Now I knew. Hua Jiyuan. In this world, once a martial artist hits Tier 7, they enter a different realm. They can fly. They are immune to most conventional weapons. They are called grandmasters. Seeing him walk on air made my heart race with ambition. With my system, reaching that level wasn't a dream, it was just a matter of time. I pulled up my status panel. Name, Su Chao level, Tier 2 Martial Artist Talents. A rank, Probe Archer. A rank, Eye of Insight. C rank, Shadow Clone, Constitution. 29 Spirit. 20 Origin Points. 3268 Skills. Shadow Piercer, Minor. Windbreaker, Great Success. Seeing over 3,000 Origin Points made me grin. I didn't want to wait. I tapped the screen and spent 1,000 points to upgrade Shadow Piercer. Instantly, a flood of combat insights rushed into my brain, and the skill jumped to Great Success. My strength was surging again. When we arrived at the school, the gates were lined with people. Teachers and students who hadn't fought cheered for us like heroes. Our principal, a man who had reportedly slain a Tier 7 beast during the battle, gave a short, inspiring speech before dismissing us. The atmosphere shifted quickly. We were all exhausted, but the weight of the losses hung over us. 5 students and 7 teachers from our school hadn't made it back. I went back to my dorm, showered, and crashed into my bed. I slept until 9 a.m. the next morning, woken up only by the gnawing hunger in my stomach. I dressed in black for the memorial service at the school auditorium. The mood was heavy. I saw the names on the caskets: Feng Luan, Luo Guangrong, Teacher Bai. Yesterday, they were laughing and breathing. Today, they were gone. Their families wailed, their voices echoing off the walls, but the dead didn't answer. This world is cruel. It doesn't care if you're a powerful martial artist or a regular person. I made a silent vow to myself. I would be more cautious than anyone else. I refused to let my parents be the ones crying over my coffin. The next few days were quiet. I fell into a routine of classes and training. When the end-of-term exams arrived for the martial arts class, I decided to hold back. I only showed the strength of a Tier 1 peak martial artist. Even so, my mastery of combat skills shocked my instructors. My teacher, Chu Xian, pulled me aside afterward. He gave me 2 bottles of blood chi potions as a reward and promised the school would provide 1 bottle a month starting next semester. He sighed, telling me he wished I had awakened sooner so I wouldn't have wasted so much time. During the exams, I finally saw the top tier of our school. The strongest senior, Su Jinsong, was a Tier 4 martial artist with a B-rank talent. He was a monster, even by the standards of specialized martial arts universities. Watching them made me realize how much further I had to go. On July 15th, just before summer break, my phone chimed with a notification. The official rewards for the Beast-Tide defense had been processed. I was nearly broke after buying medicine, so I opened the app with trembling fingers. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. 18.2 million yuan. I jumped off my bed, cheering. It was a fortune. I did the math in my head. My kills of lower-tier monsters were worth about 1 million. The 100 or so Tier 1 beasts were worth 4 million. The 70-odd Tier 2 beasts I took down brought in another 10 million. The government must have added a massive bonus to encourage people to fight. But the money wasn't the best part. I checked the Martial Artist Home app for my merit points. I had 792 points. Most students and teachers had barely earned a fraction of that. In this world, money can't buy everything. High-level techniques, gene medicines, and top-tier alloy equipment are restricted. You can only get them through the official merit store. With nearly 800 points, I finally had the keys to the kingdom. It was time to go shopping. For example, high-level martial arts techniques required at least 1,000 merit points before you could even spend the 10 million yuan needed to buy them from the store. My current points were good for other things, though. 100 points made me a 1-star honorary citizen. That meant special protection for my family and better healthcare and education privileges in the city. 1,000 points would make me a 2-star citizen, allowing me to buy a house in the top 5 core districts of Shanghai-based city. That was true high society living. There were even darker perks, like avoiding the death penalty for killing a commoner by paying a massive fine instead, though you couldn't touch another honorary citizen's family without facing the music. The system was designed to keep us hungry for monster kills. I knew I had to use what I'd earned. I immediately submitted my application for 1-star status. The approval process was fast, usually taking a day or 2. Then, I headed straight to the equipment section of the app. I was planning to head into the wilderness over summer break to hunt monsters, and I needed gear that wouldn't fail me. As I scrolled, my heart sank. The 18 million I just made suddenly felt like pocket change. B-rank alloy equipment cost anywhere from 5 to 10 million yuan per piece. I needed a long blade and a set of armor. A decent blade was 6.5 million, and the armor was even pricier at 9.3 million. That was nearly 16 million for just 2 items. I also wanted to buy a new technique for a few $100,000. The math wasn't adding up, and I still wanted to leave money for my parents. I had to compromise. I chose the B-rank alloy blade for 6.5 million. My strength was growing too fast. A cheap blade would snap like a toothpick in my hands. For the armor, I settled on a C-rank set for 4.5 million. It would do for now, and I could upgrade once I made more money in the wilderness. Between the gear and a new foundational technique called the moon-sinking fist for 250,000, I'd already burned 11 million. I wanted a fist technique just in case I ever lost my weapon in a fight. Looking at my remaining balance of 6.95 million, I felt speechless. Money comes fast, but it goes faster. Being a martial artist was a literal money pit. I decided to save the rest for a new house for my parents. They needed to get out of their current neighborhood, and I wanted to make sure they had a safety net if anything happened to me out there. I searched for Willowwood Heart to see if I could finally heal my father's old injuries. My stomach dropped when I saw the price, 42 million yuan, plus a requirement of 1,000 merit points. Even if I went to the Hunters Association, it would cost 50 million, and they were usually out of stock. Serious healing items were always in high demand because martial artists were always bleeding. The stronger I got, the poorer I felt. I was getting ready to visit Jiang Dali in the hospital. He was finally being discharged tomorrow when my phone buzzed. It was my old roommate, Hanyu. President Han, what are your orders? I joked when I picked up. Back in the dorm, we used to tease him about taking over his parents' supermarket if he couldn't find a job. Chao Gu, stop making fun of me, Hanyu groaned. Look, the semester is over. Me, Tanjun, and the others are heading out for a drink. You got time to join? Sure, I said. Same old spot. I hadn't seen them since I moved out of the dorms. We met at the night market street near the school. Since most students had already headed home for break, the place was quiet. When I arrived, the 3 of them were already there. They stood up to greet me, but I could feel the change. Now that I was an awakened martial artist, they were more formal, less relaxed. It sucked, but after a few rounds of drinks, the tension melted away. Chao Gu, remember freshman year? Tanjun laughed. We got into that massive scrap with Zhou Peng right here. How could I forget? I grinned. That idiot tried to mess with me again after he awakened. I had to teach him another lesson. They roared with laughter. No wonder. Hanyu shouted. We saw him last week, and he actually nodded at us politely. We were so confused. Come on, let's toast to Chao Gu for shutting that guy up. As the night went on, the air got warmer. So, what's the plan for summer? Hanyu asked. Heading home. I took a long pull of my beer. Yeah, I'm going home to handle some business. Then I'm heading into the wilderness. The table went silent. To them, the wilderness was a death zone, a place for legends and monsters. But for a man, wasn't that the dream? To carry a blade and face the world? I saw their somber faces and quickly changed the subject. What about you guys? Don't tell me Tanjun failed his exams because of his gaming addiction. Don't worry, Chao Gu. Tanjun smirked. We lived in the classroom for a week straight. We'll pass. Good, I said. Just focus on graduating. With gene medicines coming out, you might still have a shot at becoming martial artists later. I couldn't promise them anything yet. I didn't have the points to buy medicine for them, and I had to fix my father's legs first. We finished the night with a final toast to my safety. I paid the bill, it was nothing to me now, and stumbled back to my dorm. The alcohol hit me hard, and I crashed immediately. When I woke up the next morning at 10, the lingering aches in my body were gone. I felt refreshed, powerful, and clear-headed. I pulled up my status panel and couldn't help but smile. My status panel, which hadn't budged in over a week, finally showed some movement. I stared at the translucent screen floating in front of my eyes. Name, Su Chao. Level, Tier 2 Martial Artist. Talents, Eye of Investigation, A rank, Shadow Clone, C rank. Physique, 29. Mental Strength, 20. Origin Points, 2,268. Skills, Shadow Piercer, Level 5, Mastery. Wind Cutter, Level 5, Mastery. I noticed my mental strength was finally eligible for an upgrade again. My physique didn't show the prompt yet, likely because my mind needed to catch up to my body first. I didn't hesitate. I focused on the mental strength stat and hit upgrade. Origin points began to drain. I felt a cool, sharp sensation expanding inside my skull, my senses sharpening with every passing second. When my mental strength hit 26, that familiar, dull, throbbing pain returned. It was a warning. I knew I had to stop. Even with a system as powerful as this, I couldn't just force infinite growth. If I pushed further, my mind might snap, leaving me a vegetable. I had spent 600 points. As I suspected, the upgrade prompt now reappeared next to my physique. I poured more points in. The feeling was incredible. Energy flooded my limbs like a tidal wave. I could feel my muscle fibers knitting tighter, my bones becoming as dense as steel, and my internal organs strengthening. It was an addictive rush of pure power. I stopped when my physique hit 35. I had used another 600 points. My new stats were set: physique 35, mental strength 26, with 1,608 origin points remaining. I did a quick mental calculation. My raw physical strength was now around 3,500 kilograms. For a Tier 2 martial artist, the standard range was between 2,000 and 4,000 kilograms. I was already at the top of my tier. When I factored in the 50% power boost from my mastered level 5 skills, my actual combat output was comparable to a newly promoted Tier 3 martial artist. I let out a long breath. The system was truly broken. Most people spent 2 years of grueling training to achieve what I had done in 15 days. Of course, I had been lucky. The Beast Tide provided a feast of low-level monsters to farm for points. In the deep wilderness, I wouldn't have had it so easy. One wrong turn could land you in the stomach of a high-level beast. I stood up to test my new weight, but the doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 strangers. "Are you Mr. Su Chao?" One of them asked politely. "I am," I said, confused. "We're from the martial artist home delivery service. We have the gear you ordered yesterday. Please sign here." I was stunned by the speed. Then, I saw a ring on the man's finger flash. A large crate appeared out of thin air. My jaw nearly dropped. Even the delivery guys had spatial rings? I'd only ever seen Principal Hua and a few top teachers carry those. A basic 1 cubic meter ring cost at least 10 million credits. I didn't realize at the time that this was a premium service triggered by my high spending. They sent 2 couriers for mutual supervision. After a series of complex identity verifications, they handed over the goods and left. I locked the door and ripped the crate open. First, I pulled out the B-rank alloy longblade. It looked like an ancient straight saber, finished in a sleek silver black. It was a meter long, 60 kilograms of cold, lethal metal. I swung it a few times. The balance was perfect. Next was the C-rank alloy inner armor. It was silver gray, surprisingly light at only 10 kilograms, and thin enough to wear under my uniform without being noticed. I stripped off my shirt and put it on immediately. It felt like a second skin. Finally, I picked up the manual for the level 5 skill, Moonquaking Punch. I flipped through the pages, and the skill immediately registered on my panel. I spent 110 origin points to instantly boost it to small success stage. I decided to save the rest of my points for my next level breakthrough rather than maxing out the skill right away. By the time I was done, my stomach was growling. I spent the next 2 hours at the training grounds, getting a feel for my new strength and the Moonquaking Punch. I felt confident. I could take on any early Tier 3 martial artist, though a veteran Tier 3 would still be a challenge. I also discovered a hidden perk of the system. I could perfectly mask my power level. Unless someone was beyond Tier 9, they wouldn't be able to see my true strength. At 2 p.m., I headed out. Zhang Dali was being discharged from the hospital, and after that, I was going home. The semester was over. It was time to give my parents a surprise. Back at my family's cramped apartment, my mother, Wang Lihua, was busy in the kitchen. "Lao Su, do you know where my old martial arts uniform is?" she called out over the sound of chopping vegetables. My father, Su Jinghai, sat in his wheelchair in the living room. "Check the small box on the second shelf of the bedroom closet," he replied. "I'm cooking," Mom shouted back. "Xiao Chao is coming home soon, and I still have so many dishes to finish." Dad sighed but smiled. He wheeled himself into the bedroom to search. Today was a big day. Their son was coming home for summer break, and he was returning as an awakened martial artist. For the first time in years, the dark clouds hanging over our family were starting to lift. Dad wanted to look his best. He didn't want to look like a broken man anymore. He wanted to look like a father his son could be proud of. He finally found the old uniform and spent nearly half an hour struggling to put it on. The effort left him hacking and coughing. 3 years ago, his lungs and spine had been shattered, leaving him paralyzed and weak. Mom dropped her knife and rushed into the room, her face pale with worry. "Lao Su, are you okay? It's my fault. I shouldn't have asked you to move." Dad just shook his head, catching his breath, eyes fixed on the door. He didn't care about the pain. He just wanted to be ready when I walked through it. I should have been here sooner. I looked at my mother, Wang Lihua, and felt a sharp pang of guilt. My father, Su Jinghai, reached out and took her hand. His skin was sallow and dry. He rubbed her hand gently, his eyes full of regret. "Lihua, I'm okay," he whispered. "You've worked so hard all these years. Without you holding things together, this family would have fallen apart long ago. I'm just a burden to you both." "Don't talk like that," Mom snapped, though her voice was soft. "Don't you remember what day it is? Xiao Xiao is coming home. We can't let him see us like this. We don't want him worrying." Dad nodded quickly. Right. And listen, if he asks about the TV, just tell him I knocked it over by accident. Don't let him find out Zhang Ma-zi and his thugs smashed it." "I know," Mom sighed. "I'm just scared they'll come back. They said they weren't done with us." Dad went silent for a moment. "If it comes to that, I'll swallow my pride. I'll go to my old brothers-in-arms and beg for a loan to pay them off." Before Mom could respond, a heavy knock thundered against the door. Her face went pale. "Oh no, that's my son. The food isn't even ready. I'll get the door. Put on a smile, okay? Don't let him see anything is wrong." Mom forced a bright smile and pulled the door open. "Son, you." The smile froze. Standing at the door weren't me, but 5 burly men looking like they owned the street. The leader was a man with a face like a horse and a jagged scar running through his eyebrow. He looked mean. He didn't wait for an invitation. He shoved the door open with a violent thud, sending my mother stumbling back. "Who are you calling son?" "Wang Lihua," the man growled. "You got a death wish?" Mom caught her balance, her voice trembling as she tried to stay calm. "Boss Wang, it's a mistake. I thought it was my son. He's coming home from school today." Dad wheeled himself out of the bedroom just in time to see Mom get pushed. His face flushed with anger. "What are you doing? This is breaking and entering. Get out before we call the security teams to haul you away." The man with the scarred face was Zhang Ma-zi. He was a local debt collector and a small-time thug who preyed on the poor in our district. He sneered at my father. "Oh, look who it is. The cripple. If I hadn't lent your wife the money to save your miserable life, you'd be a corpse by now." Dad started coughing violently, his whole body shaking with rage. Mom rushed to his side, rubbing his back while glaring at the thugs. "Shut up, Zhang Ma-zi." Dad finally caught his breath. He looked at Zhang Ma-zi with cold, dark eyes. "You have some nerve. We agreed on a loan of 200,000, with 50,000 in interest. Why is the total suddenly 300,000? Zhang Ma-zi flinched for a second under Dad's gaze, but then he remembered my father was paralyzed. He puffed out his chest. "The 250 was for a 2-week term. You're late. That means the price goes up. We're only 3 days late." Mom cried out. "And we already paid you 50,000. We told you we'd have the rest in 10 days. Why can't you be reasonable?" "Reasonable?" Zhang Ma-zi burst out laughing, and his goons joined in. It was a cruel, mocking sound. He pointed a finger at Mom. "Enough talk. Give me the money. 250,000 right now, or we start taking things. I don't have time to play games with paupers." "We don't have it yet," Dad said, trying to keep his temper. "Give us a few more days to raise it." "No money." Zhang Ma-zi signaled his men. "Search the place." He walked into the kitchen and let out a nasty whistle. "Look at all this. You say you're broke, but you're eating like kings? All this food isn't cheap. You have money for a feast but nothing for me? Fine. If I don't get paid, nobody eats." A series of loud crashes echoed from the kitchen. Plates were shattered. Food was swept onto the floor. "You animals. I'll kill you," Mom screamed. That was the food she had spent all morning preparing for me. She grabbed a broom, ready to charge, but Dad grabbed her sleeve, holding her back. He was furious, but he wasn't stupid. A cripple and a middle-aged woman stood no chance against these thugs. Zhang Mazi saw Mom trying to fight back, and his eyes turned cold. You want to get violent? Fine. Boys, wreck everything. His men stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to tear our home apart. But before they could take a step, a voice cold enough to freeze blood echoed from the doorway. Go ahead. Try it. I stood there, holding my suitcase, my backpack slung over my shoulder. I had just come from the hospital after seeing my friend Hanyu off, and I was looking forward to surprising my parents with the money I'd earned. Instead, I walked into a nightmare. Xiao Xiao, you're home. My parents looked at me with a mix of joy and pure terror. They were happy to see me, but they didn't want me caught up in this. They knew I had just awakened as a martial artist, but Zhang Mazi had 2 quasi-martial artists with him. They didn't want my future ruined by a street fight. Mom, Dad, I'm back, I said quietly. I set my bag down on my suitcase. Let me handle this. Zhang Mazi looked embarrassed. He had just been threatened by a kid in front of his men. I said, Wreck it. Are you deaf? Move. The 4 goons lunged forward. I didn't even think. I moved. To my parents, it must have looked like a blur. A series of sickening cracks filled the room, followed by 4 screams of agony. In less than 3 seconds, all 4 men were on the floor. Each one held a shattered wrist and a leg bent at an impossible angle. They groaned and writhed, unable to get up. My parents stared at me, horrified by the sheer violence of it. Zhang Mazi's face went pale. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He swallowed hard, his bravado vanishing instantly. You're a martial artist? He stammered. He had done his homework before lending the money. He knew I was a student, and he knew my sister wasn't a martial artist. That's why he felt safe bullying my family. Now, the math had changed. Kid, listen, he said, his voice shaking. Maybe I went too far, but we're just here for the money. Your mother borrowed it. It's a legal debt. This is all just a big misunderstanding. I didn't say a word. I looked at the shattered plates in the kitchen. I looked at the fear in my mother's eyes and the shame on my father's face. My grip tightened. The air in the room grew heavy. A misunderstanding? I repeated, my voice cold. You trash my house, and you're calling this a misunderstanding? Zhang Mazi realized I wasn't backing down. He straightened his back, trying to regain some leverage. Look, kid, you're a martial artist, sure. But you just awakened, didn't you? We have people above us too. My boss is a Tier 2 martial artist at the peak stage. He wiped the sweat from his brow and tried to sound reasonable. I'll give you face. Your family owes 25,000. Pay that back, and we'll call it even. Of course, you'll need to cover the medical bills for my boys here. I actually laughed. The sheer audacity of the man was staggering. I didn't feel like talking anymore. In a blur, I lunged forward. Before he could blink, my hand was clamped around his throat. I lifted him off the ground with one arm, watching his feet dangle. You think you have face to give? I hissed. I gave you a chance. Now, listen to my conditions. 1. We borrowed money, and we will pay it back. But it's 20,000, not 25. We already paid 5,000 back, and we're sticking to the original agreement. I tightened my grip. His face started turning a dark shade of purple. 2. You wrecked our home. For that, you're paying us 5,000 in damages. Don't complain. Many of these things were family heirlooms. 3. You broke into a private residence and assaulted my family, specifically my injured father. For the mental trauma and medical costs, you owe us 20,000. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Look at that. The math works out perfectly. We're even. Isn't that a coincidence? Zhang Mazi was panicking. I could see it in his bulging eyes. He was losing hundreds of thousands in potential profit with every word I spoke. How was he going to explain this to his boss? 4. I continued, and I felt him physically wilt. You broke in and tried to bully the weak. I acted in self-defense. My living room has a security camera, so you're paying your own medical bills. Finally, because you terrified my parents, you're going to apologize. Then, you're going to slap yourself 10 times. Hard. I dropped him. He hit the floor, clutching his throat and gasping for air like a fish out of water. He looked at me with a mix of terror and resentment. He realized I wasn't just some hot-headed kid. I was calculating. A martial artist with a brain was a dangerous thing. If you don't do it, I said, leaning in, I'll do it for you. But I'm new to this, and I haven't quite learned how to control my strength yet. It was a blatant threat. Zhang Mazi looked at his broken men on the floor and knew he had no choice. He crawled over to my parents, his face pale. "I'm sorry," he muttered. Then, he started hitting himself. Slap, slap. He didn't stop until his cheeks were bright red and swollen. 10 times, exactly. He looked up at me, humiliated. "Can we go now?" I narrowed my eyes. This guy was a professional. He knew when to fold. That made him dangerous. People like him didn't forget grudges. I realized right then that I couldn't let him stay a threat. "Get your men and get out," I said. "Tell your boss I hope this is the end of it. If not, the consequences will be more than you can handle." They didn't say another word. The goons helped each other up, limping and groaning as they shuffled out the door. My parents stood there, speechless. They looked at me like I was a stranger. In just 2 weeks, I had changed from their quiet son into someone they didn't recognize. "Mom, Dad, you okay?" I asked, trying to soften my voice. "Did they hurt you?" My mother, Wang Lihua, walked up and looked me over. Are you really my son, Xiao Chao?" "Mom, don't be like that," I said with a wry smile. My father, Su Jinyi, was more observant. He had been a martial artist once. "Son, that speed, that wasn't the speed of someone who just awakened." I had to think fast. "Well, I was at the front lines during the Rift battle. I guess I had a breakthrough under pressure. Anyway, I just remembered I have something to take care of. I'll be back soon." "Xiao Chao, don't do anything reckless," my father called out, his voice full of worry. I didn't answer. I headed straight downstairs. Those guys were injured. They wouldn't have gone far. I found them quickly. They were hobbling toward an old sedan parked in a corner of the apartment complex. It was a pathetic sight, a group of thugs limping and cursing under the judgmental glares of the neighbors. "Boss, are we really just going to take this?" one of them hissed as they reached the car. "The Sanhe society has never been insulted like this." "Shut up," Zhang Mazi snapped, glancing around nervously. "Get in the car." I watched them drive off. It was nearly 7 o'clock, and the sky was turning a bruised purple. I started to run, keeping my distance. With my enhanced stats and my eye of inquiry, tracking a slow-moving car in city traffic was easy. I used alleys and shadows to stay out of sight. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of District 25. It was a desolate area. 2 thin guys came out to meet the car. "Boss, you're back," one of them shouted, then stopped cold when he saw the state of the others. "What happened to Brother Biao?" "We hit a wall," Biao spat, wincing as he was helped out of the car. "Just get us inside. Carefully. Watch my arm." I watched them disappear into the warehouse. I moved closer, slipping into a dark corner near the corrugated metal walls. I activated my eye of inquiry again. The walls seemed to turn translucent. I could see everything inside. My talent didn't just analyze. It could see through the very obstacles meant to hide the truth. My vision pierced through the solid walls of the warehouse. The space was huge, maybe 2,000 square meters, filled with scattered junk and old crates. In the center, a few worn-out sofas and tables were arranged like a makeshift lounge. Decks of cards lay messy across one of the tabletops. There were 11 people inside. A group of thugs stood huddled around a desk. Zhang Mazi was there, bowing his head and reporting to a man sitting in a high-backed chair. I focused my eye of inquiry on the man in the chair, and my pupils drifted. He was a martial artist. Even though he was only Tier 1, the energy radiating from him was different from the others. He looked to be in his 30s with a sharp buzz cut and a lean, capable build. He sat with his legs crossed, puffing on a cigarette, listening to Zhang Mazi's report with cold, flickering eyes. I crept closer, pressing my back against the exterior metal wall. I held my breath and listened. "Brother Long, that's how it happened," Zhang Mazi muttered, his voice trembling. "The kid told us to bring back a message. He said it ends here, or we won't be able to handle the consequences." The man in the chair, Brother Long, didn't say a word at first. Then he suddenly flicked his glowing cigarette, but right into Zhang Mazi's face. He stood up and delivered a stinging slap that echoed through the warehouse. "Useless," Brother Long roared. "I give you this territory to manage, and you can't even handle a simple debt. You took 4 brothers out there, and you bring them back with broken limbs?" Zhang Mazi didn't dare to flinch. He just stood there, letting the ash and the blow land on his face. Brother Long paced around the desk, stopping right in front of him. "The society is raising funds right now," Long said, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "The chairman found a channel for a batch of gene serum. I was going to apply for a dose for you. But you've disappointed me. You'll have to fill this financial hole yourself. As for that kid, he just awakened as a martial artist and already thinks he's untouchable? I'll give him a lesson he'll never." The word forget never left his mouth. Suddenly, Zhang Mazi's eyes went blank, then filled with a sudden, violent madness. He lunged forward, driving a concealed dagger deep into Brother Long's abdomen. You're looking for death." Long gasped, his face twisting in disbelief. He threw a heavy punch that sent Zhang Mazi flying backward, but the damage was done. He looked down at the hilt of the blade sticking out of his gut. He couldn't understand it. How did a coward like Zhang Mazi find the nerve to attack a martial artist? Before he could react, the other 10 lackeys moved. Their eyes were all gleaming with the same eerie, frantic light. They grabbed pipes and knives, screaming as they swarmed their own boss. Outside, I leaned against the wall, my eyes glowing with a strange, mystical light. This was the hidden effect of my eye of inquiry, illusion. Brother Long's scalp went numb. He couldn't comprehend why his entire crew had turned traitor at once. Their eyes were empty, driven by a madness he couldn't explain. He felt like he was being watched by a ghost. But he was a martial artist. He wasn't going to let them kill him. He fought back with ruthless efficiency. His fists and feet blurred as he sent men flying, bones snapping with every hit. The lackeys kept coming. Even Zhang Mazi crawled back up to strike again. Forced into a corner, Brother Long stopped holding back. He started killing. After a frantic, bloody struggle, the last man fell still. Brother Long collapsed onto the sofa, gasping for air. He was covered in new cuts and bruises. Though none were as deep as the initial stab wound, he looked like he'd been through hell. Outside, the glow in my eyes faded. I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. Maintaining an illusion on 10 people, including a martial artist, had drained my mental energy significantly. I clicked my tongue in frustration. Even with the element of surprise and immunity, he was still breathing. The gap between a martial artist and an ordinary person was just too wide. I had to finish this myself. I checked the area one last time. My eye of inquiry confirmed there were no security cameras. I stood up and walked toward the door. Inside, Brother Long was trying to patch his wounds, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone to call for backup. The heavy metal door creaked open. "Who's there?" Long snapped his head toward the entrance. He saw me, a young guy in student clothes, walking in calmly. He stood up, his face tight with suspicion. "Who are you?" I looked at him with a playful, mocking grin. "Who am I? Weren't you just saying you were going to give me a lesson I'd never forget? Well, I'm here. Let's see it." Brother Long froze. Realization dawned on him. "You're the student from today? Su Jianya's son? You did this." He tried to subtly press a button on his phone, but his fingers suddenly locked up. He stared at his hand in horror. It wouldn't move. "You're not being very cooperative," I whispered, my eyes flashing with that eerie light again. I sounded like a demon murmuring in his ear. I picked up a stray rag from a nearby table and used it to grab a discarded dagger from the floor. I walked up to him slowly. He couldn't even scream. I leaned in and drove the blade into his throat. "I told them to tell you. It ends here," I said softly as the life faded from his eyes. "Otherwise, you'd have to face the consequences." I watched him twitch on the floor until his breath finally stopped. Only then did I deactivate my talent and let out a long sigh of relief. Martial artists were definitely harder to control. I could only stun him for a few seconds. I carefully wiped the phone with the rag and tucked it back into his pocket, then placed the dagger back into the hand of the dead lackey who originally owned it. I scanned the room. No fingerprints, no hair, no trace of me. To anyone who found this, it would look like a brutal internal power struggle where everyone killed each other. I slipped out of the warehouse and vanished into the shadows. Using Shadow Meld, I moved much faster on the way back, taking shortcuts through narrow alleys. My mind raced, double-checking every detail. It wasn't a perfect crime, but there was no direct evidence linking me to the scene. I couldn't leave those men alive. I wasn't afraid for myself, but my parents were my weakness. If those thugs had gotten desperate, They would have targeted them, and I couldn't be there to protect them every second of the day. Back at the apartment, my mother, Wang Lihua, was pacing the room. She had tried to clean up the mess from the thug's visit, but her hands were shaking. "Why isn't Xiao Qiao back yet?" she asked, looking at my father in his wheelchair. "It's been over half an hour." Su Jianya gave her a weary, bittersweet smile. "Don't worry, Lihua. Our son knows what he's doing." My mother sighed and sat on the sofa. "Old Su, don't you think he's changed? It's only been 2 weeks, but he feels like a different person. I wonder what he's been through." My father looked thoughtful. "He's a martial artist now. When you cross that line and face life and death, your mindset changes. Don't worry. He's still our son." My mother kept glancing at the door. "I'll go start dinner. He should be home soon. It's a shame all that good food went to waste earlier." All that good food was wasted because of that damn Zhang Matzi. We usually couldn't afford to eat like that. I had spent over 200 yuan on those groceries. Now, my mother was talking about whipping up something simple, worried that I'd feel mistreated by a meager meal. I reached the door just as she said it. It had taken me 10 minutes to sprint back home. "Mom, I'm not mistreated," I said, stepping inside to stop her from heading into the kitchen. "Let's go out and eat something great." My mother, Wang Lihua, looked up and saw me. She rushed over, grabbing my hand with a mix of relief and annoyance. "You brat, you just got home and you're already running off again. You never let me rest. Eating out costs too much. Let's just make do with something simple today, and I'll cook you a feast tomorrow." "Mom, I know, I messed up," I said with a grin. "I'm staying for a few days to keep you guys company. But let's eat out tonight. It's been too long. I've made some money recently. We can afford one meal. Besides, I have something important to tell you both." Seeing my persistence, she finally gave in. "Fine, let me change my clothes first." She turned and went into her room. Once she was gone, my father, Su Jianya, shot me a questioning look. Did anything happen? I knew what he was worried about. I shook my head and smiled. "Dad, I wouldn't do anything reckless. Also, hang in there. I'm going to get you a Willowwood heart soon. Once I have it, you'll be able to recover. I just need a few more battle merits." My father's hands, resting on his lap, gave a sudden trek. "Xiao Qiao, how did you get so many merits?" "I told you, I joined the Beast-Tide Defense," I explained. "I had good luck and killed a lot of monsters. I made a decent amount of money too. I'm planning to buy us a better house." Just then, my mother walked out in her fresh clothes. She caught the word house and looked at us, confused. "What house? What are you two whispering about?" I had to explain my plan to her all over again. She rolled her eyes at me while straightening her shirt. "How much could you have possibly earned? You need to save. You're a martial artist now. You have plenty of expenses. Don't waste money on us." I shrugged casually. "I made 10 million. My mother started to nag again. 10 million? What 10? She froze. Her hand stopped moving. She stared at me, eyes wide with shock. "You said you earned how much?" I smiled at her stunned expression. My luck was good. 10 million yuan. Even after buying the gear I needed, I still have several million left. My father was just as shocked. He thought I meant I'd made a few 100,000. Even for a martial artist, money doesn't just fall from the sky. Most of what they earn goes right back into resources to increase their strength. He remembered his own time as a rank 3 martial artist before the accident. He never had much left over. My mother started taking the house idea seriously. My father's wheelchair made living in our current place a nightmare. We lived in an old building with no elevator. He was stuck inside all day unless I was home to carry him down the stairs. It was terrible for his recovery. "Mom, Dad, let's go eat first," I urged. "I'm starving. We can talk while we eat." They both nodded, still trying to process the news. We headed to a high-end restaurant in the center of District 25. I ordered a massive spread of food, only stopping when my mother started scolding me for being a spendthrift. It was the best meal we'd had since my father's injury. After the meal, my father watched my mother's happy face. He turned his head away, secretly wiping a tear from his eye. She noticed immediately and grabbed his hand. "Old Su, what's wrong?" He turned back, stroking her weathered hand. "Lihua, you've suffered so much these years. Since I got hurt, you haven't had a good meal or a new outfit. Don't say such silly things," she whispered. "None of that matters. As long as our family is safe, that's everything." The atmosphere was getting a bit too emotional for me. All right, you too. I cut in, grinning. That's enough. Think about your single son's feelings before you start showing off your love like that. That broke the tension. They both laughed. After I paid the bill, my mother insisted on packing up the leftovers. She said the meal cost half a month's salary and she wasn't wasting a bite. On the way home, I dragged them into some clothing stores. Like my father said, it had been way too long. My mother had spent ages picking out what to wear tonight, only to settle on a 2-year-old outfit. It hurt to see. I bought them several sets of clothes and shoes, only stopping when my mother looked like she was actually going to get angry at my spending. Back at the apartment, we spent hours looking at listings. We agreed to go see houses the next morning. If we were moving, we were doing it fast. That night, I lay in my cramped, dilapidated room. For 3 years, I had sweated and struggled in this tiny space. Now, I was finally leaving. I had changed my family's fate with my own hands. My mother wouldn't have to work so hard. My father wouldn't have to suffer in silence. Everything was getting better. I fell asleep feeling more at peace than ever. The next day, we arrived at the sales office for the Westlake Villa complex in District 12. The place was buzzing with people. It was a new development, finished only 2 years ago, with top-tier facilities and a beautiful private lake. The greenery was stunning, but more importantly, the security was tight. They had 24-hour guards. A car pulled up and the 3 of us got out. I helped my father into his wheelchair. Last night, my mother had argued for a cheap place as long as it had an elevator. I had stood my ground. I wanted a place with a good environment and, most importantly, high-end security to keep them safe. We finally settled on a complex called Westlake Villa. The 3 of us entered the sales office, and the place was massive. A huge 3D model of the development sat right in the center, and a giant screen on the wall played promotional videos on a loop. People were crowded around the model, pointing and whispering while sales agents gave their pitches. Everyone seemed busy when we walked in, so I just started wandering around with my parents. After a while, a young sales girl finally freed up. She was short but had a sweet face, with 2 deep dimples when she smiled. She looked like she had just started working there. "Hello? Are you looking for a new home?" she asked politely. "Is there a specific layout or size you're interested in?" "We want a 4-bedroom unit," I said. "What do you recommend?" Her eyes lit up. Customers with a clear goal are usually the ones ready to buy. Her smile widened, and she immediately went into a professional pitch. We spent about 40 minutes looking at options. Eventually, we locked onto a unit on the 10th floor of Building 6. It was a 198-square-meter apartment priced at 4.08 million yuan. The best part? It was fully furnished and move-in ready. For a family like ours that needed to move immediately, it was perfect. It even faced the private lake. We got lucky, too. Someone else had reserved it, but their family had some kind of emergency and backed out this morning. They lost their deposit, and we got the chance. The salesgirl was thrilled. She didn't expect us to make a decision so quickly, especially since I told her we'd sign the contract and pay the full amount today. For a rookie, a commission like this was huge. She became incredibly attentive, ushering us into a quiet lounge area with water while she ran to grab the paperwork. I was happy, but my mom started complaining about me wasting money again. She said we didn't need a place this big or this fancy. I just smiled. Even though she was nagging, I could see the joy in her eyes. Everyone wants to live better. They just don't always have the means. While we were laughing and chatting, a loud, shocked voice rang out nearby. "Holy crap. Chow, is that you?" I turned around and saw a guy nearly 6'3" and built like a tank. He was staring at me with a massive grin. "Hey, Xiongda," I called out, laughing. "You're on break too? Looking for a house?" His face fell the moment I used that nickname. His real name was Zhang Kuang, my childhood best friend. We grew up in the same neighborhood and were inseparable until my family had to sell our old place. Zhang Kuang had always been big for his age, and because his chest muscles were so developed, I started calling him Xiongda, Big Bear. Unlike me, Zhang Kuang was a genius. He had awakened an A-rank lightning talent in high school, the highest in our entire grade. He had been recruited by Shanghai Martial Arts University, the best of the best. He was tall, muscular, and looked a bit older than he was. People rarely guessed he was a student. I'm not short. I'm nearly 6 feet, but standing next to him, I still felt small. He was with his parents. His father, Zhang Dakong, was a local official and a martial artist. His mother, Zhou Fong, was a teacher. Our families knew each other well. Old Su, Zhang Dakong said, greeting my father with a smile. How's your recovery going? You look like you've got some color back. My father gave a bitter smile and shook his head. Same old problems, you know how it is. Seeing my father's expression, Zhang Dakong quickly changed the subject. So, you're planning to buy here? That's great. We can be neighbors again. Auntie Zhou jumped in, looking at my mother. Li Hua, let me tell you, this kid Zhang Kuang is stubborn. He made some money during the Beast Tide battle and insisted on buying us a new house. He's grown up now, has his own ideas. I can't even control him anymore. She sounded like she was complaining, but her face was radiating pride. My mother picked up on it immediately. Your Zhang Kuang has always been a good, filial boy, my mother praised. And he's at the best university in Shanghai. His future is limitless. You two are just going to enjoy your lives from now on. Auntie Zhou beamed. She grabbed my mother's hand, and the two of them started chatting like they were best friends. Zhang Kuang and I just looked at each other and shared a tired smile. Auntie Zhou wasn't a bad person. She used to feed me all the time when we were kids, but like any parent, she couldn't help showing off a little when her kid was doing well. So, have you picked a unit yet? Auntie Zhou asked. We should try to get units right next to each other. Right then, the salesgirl returned with a stack of papers. She bowed slightly to me. Mr. Su, here is the purchase contract. Please look it over. If everything is okay, we can sign right now. I took the folder. Thanks. We'll take a look. I handed it to my mother. Mom, this is for you and Dad. Check if everything looks right. Auntie Zhou froze. Li Hua, you already picked one? I thought you just got here. What's the layout? The salesgirl didn't miss the chance to pitch. Ma'am, they chose the F-32 model. It's 198 square meters. It's our most popular unit. Auntie Zhou looked at me, then leaned in toward my mother, whispering, Li Hua, did your son buy this for you? My mother looked at me with a satisfied, slightly teasing expression. Xiao Chao insisted. He said our current place doesn't have an elevator and it's too hard on us. Auntie Zhou blinked. Isn't Xiao Chao still at the Polytechnic? Did he start a business or something? She remembered I hadn't awakened back in high school. The only way a student makes that kind of money is through business. No, my mother said proudly. He awakened as a martial artist too. Just like your Zhang Kuang, he went to fight in the Beast Tide. Zhang Kuang had been listening quietly, but he couldn't hold it back anymore. He jumped toward me, his voice booming. Chao, you became a martial artist? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me? Zhang Kuang stared at me with an aggrieved look in his eyes. He looked like a jilted wife. I couldn't stand it. Big Bear, listen, I said, using his old nickname. It wasn't on purpose. I only awakened half a month ago. I just haven't had the chance to tell you yet. Zhang Kuang's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He grabbed my arm and pulled me aside, lowering his voice into a growl. What? Half a month? And you already joined the defense against the Beast Tide? Are you trying to get yourself killed? I felt a warmth in my chest. He actually cared. I wasn't on the front lines on top of the wall. I stayed below, supporting the military. It was relatively safe. Besides, you know my family's situation. I had to take the risk. He started to speak, but I cut him off. Big Bear, I know you've been trying to help. I know you had people secretly sending money to my family. But I can't rely on you forever, right? Zhang Kuang looked embarrassed. Chao, I know your personality. You're too stubborn to take charity. That's why I did it that way. I slapped his shoulder hard. Thanks, brother. But it's okay now. I have the ability to take care of them myself. Once we're moved in, I'm inviting your whole family over for dinner. Zhang Kuang felt the renewed confidence radiating off me. He looked happy. He punched my shoulder playfully. Fine. I'll wait for the call. If you need help moving, just say the word. Nearby, Auntie Zhou saw us messing around. You too. How old are you? Stop hitting each other. She turned to her husband. Old Zhang, what do you think? Let's get this same layout. I really like it. Before Uncle Zhang could answer, Zhang Kuang jumped in. Mom, I'm in. That way I can eat Mother Wang's cooking all the time. He had spent his childhood eating at my place. He'd been calling my mom Mother Wang for years. My mother, Wang Lihua, beamed at him. She always loved feeding him. Auntie Zhou rolled her eyes. You ungrateful brat. Are you saying my cooking is bad? Mom, it's not me. Zhang Kuang shouted, pointing at his father. Dad tells me that in private all the time. Uncle Zhang froze. He was just standing there minding his own business, and suddenly the fire was on him. He glared at his son with a look that said, "You're dead later." Then he scrambled to explain. "Wife, you know me. I'd never say that. Don't listen to his nonsense. I've eaten your cooking for decades. My stomach can't live without it." Auntie Zhou couldn't do anything with those two. They were both shameless. But the joking lightened the mood. In the end, Zhang Kuang's family decided to buy the unit directly across from ours. The sales girl was ecstatic. 2 large units sold in one afternoon. She was already planning a celebration with her friends. We signed the contracts and paid the down payments. The paperwork went fast. By the time we finished, it was late. We all went out to eat together. Uncle Zhang ordered a bottle of wine and asked my father, Su Jianya, if he wanted a glass. My father was in high spirits. Buying this house meant escaping the cage of our old life. He agreed to a small glass. Even Zhang Kuang and I had one. It was a major milestone. Zhang Kuang insisted on paying for the meal. I didn't fight him. He had been a martial artist longer and came from a wealthier background. Between brothers, these things didn't matter. During dinner, Zhang Kuang asked about my plans for the break. When I told him I was heading to the wilderness, he choked on his drink. "Chow, tell me the truth. What's your actual rank?" "Tier 2 martial artist," I said quietly. I didn't see a point in lying to him. "What?" Zhang Kuang dug a finger into his ear. "Tier 2. You're kidding, right?" I shook my head. Zhang Kuang looked like he was about to faint. He had an A-rank talent. He was considered a genius. Yet, after 3 years of elite schooling and endless resources, he was only a Tier 4. I had hit Tier 2 in 15 days. He didn't even know I was already nearing Tier 3. He leaned in close. "Chow, did you actually awaken an S-rank talent?" I shook my head. "It's A-rank. But my situation is a bit unique. Don't tell anyone. I'm only telling you. I needed a cover story. Without an A-rank label, my growth speed made no sense. But I would never mention the system. Human nature is a dangerous thing to test." Zhang Kuang nodded solemnly. "Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. But the wilderness is too dangerous for your level. When you go, call me. I'm going with you." I knew I couldn't talk him out of it. I patted his shoulder. "Fine. I'll let you know." After saying goodbye to Zhang Kuang's family, the 3 of us took a taxi home. We needed to pack. We were moving tomorrow. There wasn't much to pack, honestly. Most of our stuff was old and broken. We'd sold anything of value years ago. While we rested, I pulled out my phone. I transferred 1.5 million yuan to my mother's account. I told her it was for daily expenses and my father's recovery. I told her not to be stingy. My mother stared at the balance on her phone. She went pale, then silent. Suddenly, she stood up and ran into the bathroom. I heard the water running, but I also heard her muffled sobbing. I started to get up, but my father stopped me. "Let her cry, son. She's been holding back the bitterness for years. It's better for her to let it out." The burden on her shoulders was too heavy. "Now that you can help, she can finally breathe. Son, thank you." As he spoke, tears began to stream down his own face. None of us had lived an easy life. I knelt down and gripped my father's hand tightly. I looked him in the eyes. "Dad, this is what I should do. If you hadn't risked your life to protect Mom and me back then, you wouldn't have been hurt. You're the one who suffered the most. You're a brave man, a great father, a good husband." Hearing those words, getting that validation from his son, my father broke. He cried like a child. I just sat there, handing him tissues and holding his hand. They had been suppressed for too long. They needed this release. I had already vented my own frustrations through the blood and violence of the beast tide. 10 minutes later, my mother emerged from the bathroom. Her eyes were red and swollen, but she was smiling. It was a real smile. Before, her smiles always felt tense, like she was holding a crumbling wall together. Now, she looked light. She looked free. My mother walked out of the bathroom. My father stood up, reaching out his hands to her. They moved toward each other, and we all pulled into a tight, silent embrace. It was the end of an era. Our new life was finally beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of activity in the kitchen. A rich, savory aroma drifted through the air, making my stomach growl instantly. I followed the scent and saw my mother busy at the stove. "Mom, what are you making?" It smells incredible, I said, leaning against the doorframe. She turned around and gave me a playful look. You still have the nose of a bloodhound, don't you? I'm stewing some meat for noodles. Eat up. Once we finish breakfast, we're moving. My father walked out of his room then, a genuine smile on his face. After the emotional release of the night before, both of them looked younger, lighter. We ate breakfast together, laughing and talking. By 11 o'clock, the moving truck arrived. We didn't have much. As we stood downstairs, the three of us looked back at the apartment where we had lived for the last 3 years. It was the place that had witnessed our darkest, most difficult days. I took one last look and whispered a goodbye. It took a few days to get everything settled in our new home in the Westlake district. There were errands to run, new furniture to buy, and endless cleaning. My mother was like a different person. She had the energy of a teenager, buzzing around the house and organizing every corner with a constant smile. My father couldn't stay inside. He spent his afternoons downstairs, playing chess and chatting with the other retirees in the neighborhood. I tried to help, but my mother literally chased me out of the kitchen, telling me I was just getting in her way. Left with nothing to do, I locked myself in the study. I spent my time buried in data about the wilderness. I was preparing for my first real excursion. I even met up with Zhang Kuang for a few drinks to pick his brain, since he'd actually been out there before. A week passed. The house was finally perfect. We decided to host a dinner for the friends and relatives who had helped us over the years. We wanted to show them the new place, but more importantly, I wanted to pay back every cent we had borrowed. My father's old comrades from his hunting team came too. They were stunned by our new life, patting my father on the back and telling him he'd finally made it through the storm. My father drank a lot that night. I was worried about his health, so I stepped in and took the toast for him. By the end of the night, I was the one stumbling to bed. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. Everything at home was settled. Tomorrow, I would head to the wilderness. I pulled up my system interface out of habit, and my heart skipped a beat. Name, Su Chao. Level, Tier 2 Martial Artist. Talents, A rank Eye of Insight, C rank Shadow Clone. Physique, 35. Mental Strength, 26. Origin Points, 1498. Skills, Shadow Piercer, Master. Wind Cutter, Master. Moon Suppressing Fist, Basic. My mental strength was finally ready for an upgrade. I focused, and the origin points began to drain. I felt a familiar surge of energy. My mind felt sharper, clearer, and then, after spending 900 points, that familiar pressure built up in my skull. I knew I had reached the limit for now. My mental strength hit 35. That was the standard for a Tier 3 martial artist. With my mind strengthened, my physique was now unlocked for further growth. I didn't hesitate, and I dumped the rest of my points in. Energy from the surrounding air rushed into me like a whirlwind. It felt like my bones were being forged in a furnace. My muscles tightened, my organs strengthened, and I could even feel my blood changing, vibrating with a new kind of power. Suddenly, I felt a click deep inside me. Something had been unlocked. It was the gene lock. For naturally awakened artists like me, this was the moment of evolution. People who used gene serums had to buy expensive, rare medicine to break these locks, and even then, they were capped at Tier 8. But for me, the ceiling didn't exist. The transformation finished. I looked at the new stats. My physique had jumped to 62. I was now a Tier 3 martial artist. I stood up and stretched, my joints popping like firecrackers. I felt explosive. A Tier 3 artist usually has a physical strength between 4,000 and 8,000 kilograms. At 62, I was sitting at 6,200. With my master-level skills providing a 50% boost, I could hit for 9,300 kilograms. That was enough to rival a beginner Tier 4. I looked at my points. Only 328 left. Upgrading was expensive, but I wasn't worried. The wilderness was full of monsters, and monsters meant more points. Tier 3 was just the beginning. I needed to test this new power. I decided to head to the Starry Sky Dojo. It was founded by the legendary warrior Tyrant Blade and had branches everywhere. They had the best combat rooms for testing speed and power. I grabbed a quick breakfast with my parents, told them I was heading out, and stepped into the sunlight, ready to see what I was truly capable of. The cost for training wasn't cheap. The Starry Sky Dojo charged by the hour, and the price spiked depending on the rank of the combat room you needed. After buying the house for my family and giving my mom 1.5 million, I had about 1.3 million left in my account. It was enough to cover my training and gear for now, but I needed to be careful. I walked into the massive lobby and spoke to the staff. I requested a Tier 3 combat room. The price tag hit me like a physical blow, 50,000 yuan per hour. I gritted my teeth and paid for 2 hours. That was 100,000 yuan gone in a heartbeat. I followed the staff member into the elevator. We headed up to the 3rd floor. He opened the door to a private room and gave me a quick rundown of the controls before leaving. I stepped inside and looked around. The room was huge, maybe 500 square meters. The walls were reinforced with high-grade alloy. Unless you possessed power far exceeding the room's tier, you couldn't even scratch them. Even if you did, the material was designed to self-repair. Near the entrance stood a rack filled with standard weapons. I saw everything from blades to spears. But my eyes were drawn to the center of the room. A humanoid puppet stood there, its surface gleaming with a cold, metallic luster. The staff called it a battle turtle. These puppets were the backbone of the dojo. They were incredibly rare and could mimic the strength and speed of a Tier 3 martial artist. They didn't feel pain. They didn't get tired. As long as I didn't hit it with Tier 4 power, I could beat on it all day without breaking it. The dojo also had gravity rooms, but those were even more expensive and impossible to book without a long wait. I'd heard rumors about where this tech came from. About 20 years after the Great Cataclysm, during the Second Energy Tide, things like gene serums, high-grade alloys, and these puppets just appeared. There were secrets buried in the history of our bases. I didn't know the truth yet, but I knew that as I got stronger, the world would have to stop hiding its secrets from me. I started with a speed test. I moved, my body blurring as I darted across the room. My shadows flickered behind me. After a few minutes, I checked the readout. 77 meters per second. A typical Tier 3 artist ranges between 60 and 90, so I was right in the middle. But I had an ace in the hole. My C-rank Shadow Meld talent had evolved. It didn't just give me clones, it kept the speed boost from its previous form. Even though the percentage had dropped as I got stronger, I still had a 50% increase. I activated it. My body felt weightless. My speed exploded to over 115 meters per second. That was terrifyingly close to the 120-meter limit of a Tier 4 artist. If I needed to run or dodge, most Tier 4s wouldn't even be able to catch my shadow. Next, I activated the Battle Turtle. It didn't use weapons, just raw Tier 3 force. I started with my bare fists, getting a feel for my new physical limits. Once I was comfortable, I grabbed a standard blade from the rack. 2 hours later, the door slid open. I walked out drenched in sweat, my lungs burning, but I felt incredible. It was a rush. I could go all out against the puppet without holding back or worrying about killing someone. The 100,000 yuan felt worth it, even if I couldn't afford to do this every day. My next stop was the Hunters Association. I stocked up on essentials, dried rations, medical kits, and high-energy supplements. When I walked out 30 minutes later, I was hauling a massive tactical backpack. It was heavy, but it would be empty soon enough, ready to be filled with monster parts one could sell for a profit. I checked my bank balance. 800,000 left. I let out a bitter laugh. Martial artists made money fast, but we spent it faster. I had burned through nearly 18 million yuan in less than 10 days. I really needed this wilderness trip to be profitable. I spent the rest of the day with my parents. I didn't lock myself in my room to train. Tomorrow, I was heading into the wilderness, and I didn't know when I'd be back. I wanted to cherish every second with them. They had been against the idea at first. They thought I was rushing into danger too soon after awakening. I had to lie a little, telling them I already had the strength of a Tier 2 artist, and that Zhang Kuang was coming with me. They knew Zhang Kuang was experienced and strong, so they finally relented, though the worry never left their eyes. They made me promise to call and report my safety as often as I could. I went to bed early that night. I needed the rest. In the wilderness, a good night's sleep was a luxury I wouldn't have. The next morning, we reached the exit gate of Sector 28. This was the closest gate to the Sector 12 wilderness zone. The area was packed with martial artists lining up for registration. Among the crowd, Zhang Kuang and I stood out. We both carried oversized tactical packs. I had my straight blade slung at my side, while Zhang Kuang, standing nearly 1.9 meters tall, carried a long spear on his back. Big Bear, I whispered, looking around. Why are there so many unawakened people hanging around the gate? I pointed to a group of young men weaving through the lines, whispering to the warriors. Zhang Kuang followed my gaze. Them? They're looking for work as followers. They're brave souls, or desperate ones. He sighed. Not everyone awakens naturally, but you still have a chance until you're 30. These guys are in their 20s and refuse to be ordinary. They follow martial artists into the wild to carry bags or harvest materials. He looked at me seriously. The theory is that being near the fighting and the monsters can trigger an awakening. But the death rate is insane. If things get bad, a martial artist isn't obligated to protect their followers. I felt a mix of respect and pity for them. I shifted my gaze to another part of the gate. Hey, why is that lane empty? Those people aren't even carrying packs. That's the VIP lane for Tier 4 and above, Zhang Kuang explained. Fewer people, no waiting. Most of them have storage rings, so they don't need to haul gear like we do. We're stuck in the Tier 1 to 3 line. He grinned at me. Actually, Chaozi, why are you here with me? You should go use that lane. Don't worry about it, Chaozi, Zhang Kuang said, waving off my suggestion to use the VIP lane. It's your first time out. There's a lot you don't know yet, and I'd rather stick around to chat and help you pass the time. It'll only be 30 minutes anyway. I looked at the massive line snaking toward the horizon and sighed. I hadn't realized so many people headed into the wilderness every single day. You're starting to feel it, aren't you? Zhang Kuang asked, noticing my expression. The further you go as a martial artist, the more resources you burn through. The wilderness is dangerous. Yeah, but it's where the money is. You kill monsters for materials, or you find rare herbs and spirit fruits. The Hunters Association and the big merchant guilds pay a fortune for that stuff. His voice dropped an octave, turning serious. But listen to me. The most valuable treasures are always guarded by the deadliest monsters. Don't go out there thinking you're going to get lucky and strike it rich overnight. That kind of thinking gets people killed. Stay cautious, or you won't be coming back. I cut him off with a grin. I know, Big Bear. I've done my homework. That's why I asked you to come along, for the experience. I've set our activity zone within 50 kilometers of the base city. Mostly low-level monsters there. Anything above Tier 4 is rare. It's safer that way. Zhang Kuang gave me a thumbs up, looking relieved. Good. You're still the same cautious Chaozi I know. I can relax a bit now. The time passed quickly as we talked. When we reached the front, the registration was fast. Since it was my first time, they issued me a permanent identity card. From now on, I just have to scan it to pass through. We walked through a long, high-tech scanning tunnel and finally stepped through the massive, heavy city gates. The wilderness lay before us. As soon as we cleared the entrance, the crowds thinned out, everyone fanning out toward their own destinations. Our target was Kaiyang County, an abandoned town about 35 kilometers to the northwest. The moment we hit the open trail, Zhang Kuang's relaxed attitude vanished. He pulled the long spear from his back, gripping it tight, his eyes scanning the brush. We picked up the pace, sprinting toward the ruins. Every now and then, a stray monster would cross our path. Most were unranked or Tier 1. I didn't even give Zhang Kuang a chance to move. I handled them with a single strike each, moving fluidly. As monsters grow in power, they also grow in intelligence. The truly dangerous ones knew to stay far away from human-based cities. But once we hit the 10-kilometer mark, the forest on the side of the road exploded. A Tier 2 iron-footed bull charged out, hooves thundering against the dirt. Chaozi, watch out, Zhang Kuang yelled. This one is. He didn't even finish his sentence. I lunged forward, my blade a blur of silver. With one clean sweep, the bull's head parted from its shoulders. Its massive body kept skidding forward for several meters before collapsing in a cloud of dust. Zhang Kuang's mouth hung open. Holy, Chaozi, that was a Tier 2 monster. You just one-shot it. I checked my system panel. My origin points had jumped by 38. I've had a bit of a breakthrough recently, I said with a smirk. I knelt down to harvest the hooves. We didn't have enough space in our packs for the whole carcass, even though the meat was worth a decent amount. We had to stick to the high-value parts. These hooves alone were worth a few thousand. Don't forget the spirit scale, Zhang Kuang reminded me, though he still looked a bit dazed. You need those to record your military merits. Got it, I said. I reached into the bull's neck and pulled out an oval metallic scale. 2 glowing spirit veins flickered on its surface. Every monster had one, and the number of veins indicated its tier. The government collected them in exchange for merit points. Zhang Kuang rolled his eyes, muttering "freak" under his breath. He had no idea my recent breakthrough meant I was already a Tier 3 martial artist. We kept moving, and the notifications kept rolling in. Kill Tier 2 Swift Demon Rabbit, plus 32 origin points. Kill Tier 1 Bloodhound, plus 15 origin points. Kill Tier 2 Eagle Claw Cat, plus 33 origin points. By the time we'd been out for 3 hours, Zhang Kuang hadn't even had to break a sweat. He looked almost depressed. I think he planned on showing off his skills to me, but instead, he was just watching a massacre. He kept glancing at me, clearly impressed by how decisive and ruthless I was. I didn't look like a rookie. I looked like a veteran. I, on the other hand, was ecstatic. This was the best decision I'd ever made. I already had nearly 500 origin points and a pack half full of materials. I didn't let the success go to my head, though. I kept my eye of insight active. In the open wilderness, it was like a cheat code. I could sense every blade of grass and every hidden beast within a 2-kilometer radius. I was scanning the path ahead when I suddenly froze. "What is it?" Zhang Kuang asked, his hand tightening on his spear. My expression went cold. I have a specific sensing technique. About 1 kilometer to our left front, there's a pack of bloodthirsty demon wolves heading right for us. You sure? He knew I wouldn't joke about that. Positive, I said. About 20 of them. 7 or 8 are Tier 2. The rest are Tier 1. But the Alpha is an early Tier 4. Zhang Kuang's face hardened. He looked me in the eye. "Chaozi, if I pin down the Alpha, can you hold your own against the rest? Just give me enough time to kill the leader." I gripped my blade. "No problem. Leave the pack to me. The Alpha is yours. I'll handle the Tier 1 and Tier 2 wolves," I told him. Zhang Kuang hesitated. "Chaozi, I know you're strong for a Tier 2, but this is a pack. If things go south, I might not be able to reach you in time." I looked him dead in the eye. "Big Bear, since when did you become such a chatterbox? Just do it." Seeing the look on my face, Zhang Kuang stopped arguing. We moved fast. We stashed our heavy backpacks high up in a tree and climbed up ourselves, waiting for the slaughter to begin. A few minutes later, the ground started to vibrate. The tree beneath me swayed. They were here. A pack of bloodthirsty demon wolves burst into the clearing. In the center was the Alpha, a massive beast over 4 meters long, looking like a small mountain of fur and muscle. Just as they passed under our tree, the Alpha's ears twitched. It sensed us. "Now!" Zhang Kuang roared. He launched himself from the branch like a human missile. Lightning crackled around his body, trailing behind him as he aimed his spear straight for the Alpha's skull. The sheer power of the move was terrifying. The Alpha managed to jerk its head at the last second, saving its life, but the spear tip tore through its ear, sending blood spraying across the dirt. The Alpha let out a deafening howl and lunged at Zhang Kuang. My friend didn't back down. He took the initiative, his spear moving in a blur of thunder, keeping the beast pinned down. The rest of the pack went wild seeing their king wounded. They snarled, closing in to swarm Zhang Kuang. I didn't give them the chance. I dropped from the tree like a shadow, my blade pointed straight at the nearest Tier 2 wolf. It was so focused on Zhang Kuang that it never saw me coming. My blade sliced clean through its neck, and its head hit the dirt before its body did. I didn't stop. I spun, delivering 2 diagonal slashes that ended 2 Tier 1 wolves instantly. I was only showing the strength of a Tier 2 peak, but with my movement techniques, I was a ghost in their ranks. I hacked and slashed, every movement calculated, every strike a kill. In less than 2 minutes, 20 wolves lay dead at my feet. Only 5 Tier 2s remained. They backed away, their eyes filled with a very human-like terror. Over at the main fight, the Alpha saw its pack being decimated and went into a frenzy. It was trapped, bleeding from several charred puncture wounds where Zhang Kuang's lightning had struck. Sensing it was losing, the Alpha let out a final, piercing howl. Its body suddenly swelled, its muscles bulging as it entered a blood rage state. It slammed into Zhang Kuang with a burst of speed, forcing him back a few steps, and then it did something unexpected. It turned and bolted into the woods. Zhang Kuang was furious. "You think you're getting away?" I'd already killed 20 wolves, and he hadn't finished his one target yet. He had a reputation to keep. He let out a roar of his own. 9-section Thunder Spear, second form, Thunder Break. His entire body became a pillar of lightning. He transformed into a bolt of white light and streaked into the forest after the alpha. A moment later, a pained shriek echoed through the trees. I wasn't worried. Zhang Kuang was stronger than that wolf. It was only a matter of time. I turned my attention back to the 5 remaining wolves. The slaughter continued. 10 breaths later, I stood alone among a field of corpses. 25 wolves in total. I glanced at my system panel. Another 500 origin points. I had to move fast. I needed to harvest the materials and catch up to Zhang Kuang. The teeth and claws were the most valuable parts, worth about 50,000 a set. I skipped the pelts because they took too long to skin. After a few minutes of quick surgery, I grabbed our backpacks and sprinted in the direction Zhang Kuang had gone. 3 kilometers in, I heard voices. Angry voices. I slowed down, activating my eye of insight. My pupils contracted. 5 men were standing in a clearing. 2 were Tier 4 warriors, and the other 3 were Tier 3, with one of them at the very peak of the rank. This was an experienced hunting squad. And right in the middle of the tension lay the carcass of the Tier 4 alpha wolf. When I stepped into the clearing, the 5 men barely glanced at me. To them, I was just some Tier 2 kid. Big Bear, what's going on? I asked. Zhang Kuang was fuming. I heavily wounded this alpha and tracked it here. These guys happened to be passing by, landed one final blow, and now they're claiming the whole kill belongs to them. Before I could respond, the Tier 3 peak warrior stepped forward, sneering. Watch your mouth, kid. We killed this wolf together. How do we know you even touched it? You're lying through your teeth. Zhang Kuang shouted. Look at the wounds. Those are spear punctures with lightning residue. Do any of you use a lightning spear? The man stammered, unable to find an answer. It was a blatant lie, and everyone knew it. Finally, the leader of their group, a bald man in his 40s and one of the Tier 4s, stepped out. All right, look, maybe you did wound it, but we finished it. Let's be reasonable. A Tier 4 alpha is worth about 1 million. We'll split it. We take the body, you take the teeth and claws. That's 500,000 each way. You can even have the spirit scales. The Tier 3 warrior opened his mouth to protest, but the bald leader shut him down with a single cold glare. Zhang Kuang looked at me. I knew what he was thinking. He was an A-rank lightning talent. He could probably fight his way out, but he was worried about me. He thought I was just a Tier 2 who would get caught in the crossfire. I leaned in and whispered in his ear. Big Bear, if you're not happy with this, do what you want. Don't worry about me. I can handle myself. Zhang Kuang shook his head, thinking I was just being stubborn. He didn't want to risk my life over a few 100,000 credits. He stepped forward, harvested the teeth, claws, and scales, and gave the group a long, meaningful look. Let's go, he muttered, grabbing my arm and pulling me away. Once we were out of earshot, the Tier 3 warrior turned to his leader. Captain, why did we let them take half? They're just 2 brats. The bald captain watched our retreating backs, his eyes narrowing. Use your head, you idiot. Those 2 aren't as simple as they look. The spearman in that group could have taken down a Tier 4 bloodthirsty wolf king on his own. He was strong, stronger than me, I suspected. He gave off a dangerous vibe. Looking at their ages, they were likely college students, yet they already possessed such terrifying power. People with that kind of talent and background aren't the type you want to offend. If I hadn't been worried about making our blazing squad look weak, I wouldn't have even bothered taking those materials. Offending 2 young men with limitless potential over a few 100,000 credits just wasn't worth it. My teammates stayed silent, processing what I had said. Our vice captain, another Tier 4 warrior, spoke up next. Did you guys notice the one who looked like a Tier 2? He didn't feel simple either. You know my intuition is usually spot on. I nodded, agreeing with him. Exactly. He was too calm. Facing a squad where everyone is Tier 3 or higher, he didn't even blink. He's either a complete idiot or he has a massive trump card. I'm betting on the latter. Old San, keep your temper in check from now on. Our squad is decent, but there are plenty of powers in the base who can crush us. If we kick a steel plate one day, it'll be too late for regrets. As Zhang Kuang and I walked away from the bald captain's group, I noticed his mood was low. I patted his shoulder. Cheer up, Big Bear. Their leader was sensible enough. We couldn't have carried that wolf carcass anyway. The fur was ruined during the fight, so it wasn't worth much. If you're still pissed, we can go back and jump them right now. Zhang Kuang sighed and shook his head. Forget it, Chow. You're right. We got the most valuable parts. I shouldn't stoop to their level. It's just that tier 3 peak guy. He was way too arrogant. If I see him again, I'm definitely taking him down. We continued our trek toward Kaiyang County. The journey was relatively smooth. We ran into a tier 3 shadow claw cat, but I let Zhang Kuang handle it so he could blow off some steam. He finished it in a single move, then shot me a proud, chin-up look. I couldn't help but laugh. He was reliable, but sometimes he was incredibly childish. By 3 in the afternoon, we finally reached the outskirts of Kaiyang. Looking at the ruins of this pre-cataclysm town, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. I could almost see the ghosts of the past, the busy streets and the flow of traffic. Now, there was nothing but crumbling walls, overgrown weeds, and monsters roaming the streets. Chow, stay sharp, Zhang Kuang whispered, snapping me out of my thoughts. Monsters here are densely packed. Usually, you won't see anything above tier 4, but high-level beasts wander through sometimes. We need to be on high alert. I nodded. Don't worry. I've already scanned the area. Nothing nearby can threaten us yet. Let's find a place to hunker down and eat first. I pointed toward a building about a kilometer to our left. That place looks good. Great visibility, and the monsters on the way aren't strong. Nice catch, Chow. You've thought of everything. We moved fast, blurring through the ruins until we reached the building. It used to be a hotel. I wasn't sure how many floors it originally had, but only 10 remained. The top had been sheared off in some past battle. We slipped past the monsters on the ground floor and headed up to the 7th. We chose a room and locked the door. We purposely left the ground floor monsters alive. They acted as a natural alarm and kept other wandering beasts away. The room smelled of decay and the windows were shattered, but in the wasteland, you can't be picky. We sat by a window and pulled out our rations. It was processed meat from powerful monsters, tasted like cardboard, but it packed enough energy to keep us going. As I ate, I pulled up my status panel. Name, Su Chao level, Tier 3 warrior talents. I have Insight, A rank, Shadow Clone, C rank, Constitution, 62 Spirit, 35 Origin Points, 1533 Skills, Shadow Piercer, Basic, Mastery, Wind Cutter, Basic, Mastery, Mountain Crusher, Basic, Proficient. Since entering the wasteland, I'd farmed about 1,200 Origin Points. It wasn't as fast as fighting a beast tide, but it was steady. I looked at the Mountain Crusher skill. It would cost 1,000 points to bring it to Mastery, but I decided against it. The power boost wouldn't be significant enough right now. My physical stats had just hit Tier 3, and I needed time to adapt to my new strength before pushing further. Instead, I looked at my talents. Upgrading an A-rank talent would cost an astronomical amount, but my C-rank Shadow Clone was a different story. If I could push it to B rank, it would be a game changer. If I had points left over, I'd dump them into Wind Cutter to reach the perfect stage. Very few people ever mastered even a basic skill to that level. I finished my meal and closed my eyes to rest. I needed to be at my peak for the slaughter ahead. 30 minutes later, I opened my eyes. I felt perfect. Zhang Kuang was ready too. He looked at me for orders. He had planned to lead this trip, but after seeing how veteran and capable I was, he started deferring to me. I walked to the window and activated my Eye of Insight. I checked every angle of the surrounding streets. We're on the edge of the county, I told him. Within 2 kilometers, there are no major threats. A few Tier 3s, but mostly trash. We'll kill the Tier 3s for the cash. Same rule. You take the Tier 3s, I'll handle the Tier 1s and 2s. We'll push into the city block by block. My scouting will keep us out of the real danger zones. Zhang Kuang grinned. Sounds like a plan. Let's go make some money. Zhang Kuang hadn't expected much from this trip. He didn't realize my scouting abilities were this broken. In a place like this, he was basically riding my coattails. Most squads with our power level would be crawling through these streets, terrified of every shadow. They wouldn't dream of hunting Tier 3 and Tier 4 monsters exclusively. The heavy hitters usually headed much further out for bigger paydays, leaving the outskirts of the base to the cautious types. Chow, Zhang Kuang said, looking at me with newfound respect. I'm following your lead. Where do we start? I called him over to the window. I pointed toward a crumbling 3-story building nearby. See that wreck? There's a Tier 3 blood-patterned spider inside. It's guarded by dozens of Tier 1 and Tier 2 trash. Also, check that factory building over there. I kept listing monster dens and hidden threats one by one. Zhang Kuang's eyes followed my finger, his expression shifting from surprise to awe. To everyone else, Kaiyang County was a death trap. To me, it was a buffet. I stood by the window, feeling like a commander surveying a battlefield. This was my hunting ground now. We moved out. Our first target was on the second floor of a ruined shopping mall. A Tier 3 blood tank boar was fast asleep. It was a massive beast, over 3 meters long, with fur like steel needles and 2 jagged tusks jutting from its snout. A few Tier 2 lackeys wandered nearby, completely unaware that 2 predators had already slipped into the room. This was our 5th Tier 3 kill of the day. My eye of insight allowed us to bypass the patrols and get right into position. We had the routine down to a science. Zhang Kuang would deliver the killing blow to the main target, and I would clean up the surrounding minions. We'd grab the loot and vanish before the rest of the pack could swarm us. It was efficient. It was profitable. Not only were we stacking up high-grade materials, but my origin points were skyrocketing from the sheer volume of low-level kills. This boar was the last Tier 3 in the immediate area. After this, we were heading deeper into the city. Zhang Kuang glanced at me. I nodded. He exploded forward like a cannonball. His spear whistled through the air, piercing the blood tank boar's skull before it even opened its eyes. The Tier 2 monsters shrieked in rage, but they were too late. Their boss was dead. Zhang Kuang started harvesting the materials, ignoring the monsters closing in. That was my job. I stepped forward, B-rank alloy blade in hand. It wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter. My stats were nearing the peak of Tier 3. Against these lower-level beasts, I was a god. I held back my full strength to keep Zhang Kuang from getting too suspicious, but I still cut through them like a hot knife through butter. One swing, one kill. I noticed Zhang Kuang watching me as he worked. His gaze was complicated. He knew I was growing too fast, but he was smart enough not to ask. Everyone has secrets in this world. We need to move, I said, glancing at the stairs. I could hear more monsters rushing up from the first floor. Since we couldn't fly, getting surrounded in a building was a death sentence. I kept my eye of insight active, scanning the streets outside for an escape route. Now that I was Tier 3, I could keep the eye open much longer without draining my energy. Big Bear, let's go, I shouted. I had already cleared a path through 60 monsters. Zhang Kuang finished packing the loot, his eyes wide at the mountain of corpses I'd left behind. We broke out through the southeast exit just as the swarm converged on the mall, disappearing into the ruins before they could pin us down. 3 kilometers away, we ducked into an abandoned apartment to catch our breath. We dumped our bags and started counting the haul. Man, Chow, this is incredible, Zhang Kuang grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. I've made more today than I did in a week with my old squad. You have to call me every time you hit the wilderness. In less than a day, we'd bagged a Tier 4, 7 Tier 3s, and dozens of Tier 2s. We even had a pile of spirit scales that could be traded for military merit. Our bags were so full we had to start leaving the common materials behind. I did the math. Our haul was worth about 4 million. Split 2 ways, that was 2 million each for a single day's work. A normal person would have to toil for a lifetime to see that kind of money. My only regret was not having a storage ring to carry the rest of the carcasses. But the real prize wasn't the money. I looked at my internal system. My origin points had hit 6,383. Between the starting points I had and the massive kill count from the mall, I was loaded. I didn't hesitate. I looked at my C-rank shadow clone talent and dumped the points into it. I wanted to see what a breakthrough would bring. The points drained rapidly, the numbers spinning down until they hit 1,383. A golden light flashed in my mind. The talent section updated. My C-rank shadow clone was gone. In its place was a B-rank talent, teleportation. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. A space-type ability. This changed everything. I needed to find a place to test this out immediately. Seeing my origin points drop by 5,000 made my heart ache, but the power was worth it. I decided not to touch the remaining points for now. I needed to save them to push my primary 5G Shadow Piercer technique to the perfection stage. The entire upgrade had only taken a few breaths. Across the room, Zhang Kuang was still hunched over the pile of materials, counting our loot. He had a strange, almost lewd grin on his face, probably dreaming about how he'd spend the money. I stood up and headed for the door. "Hey, Big Bear, I'm heading out for a bit," I called out. "Where are you going, Chow?" he asked, looking up. "You want me to come along while you take a dump?" I raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to watch that?" Zhang Kuang shook his head frantically. "Never mind. Just don't go too far. Stay safe out there." I stepped outside and activated my eye of investigation. I scanned the area until I found a spot with fewer monsters. It was a relatively open space with only a few Tier 1 and Tier 2 beasts wandering around. It was perfect. I activated my new B-rank talent, teleportation. My body vanished instantly. A split second later, a loud crash echoed through the street. I had slammed directly into a wall 100 meters away, bringing the whole thing down. I crawled out from the rubble, covered in dust and coughing. "Damn it," I muttered, brushing off my clothes. That was embarrassing. It was too fast. I hadn't been able to react in time. I clearly hadn't mastered the timing yet and needed more practice. The commotion I made caught the attention of the nearby monsters. They growled and started charging toward me from all sides. I pulled out my long blade. This was actually perfect. I needed some moving targets to practice on. A few breaths later, the monsters were nothing but corpses on the ground. I sheathed my blade, feeling satisfied, and went back to practicing the teleportation. I was more careful this time. I didn't try to go too far. I focused, and my body vanished again. I reappeared exactly 50 meters away, standing firmly on my feet. It worked. I felt like a kid with a brand new toy. I kept pushing myself, flickering across the ruins over and over again. I didn't stop until a wave of mental exhaustion hit me. The talent was incredible, but the cost was high. It drained both my physical stamina and my mental energy at a rapid pace. At my current level, I could probably only keep this up for about 15 minutes in a real fight. Still, the results were undeniable. With this ability, I could instantly appear anywhere within a 200-meter radius. I could even chain the jumps together. I knew as my overall strength grew, that distance would only increase. This was a literal lifesaver. My chances of surviving the wilderness had just skyrocketed. I looked around. The smell of blood from the monsters I'd just killed was starting to draw more predators. It was time to head back.